Good evening, everyone. A quorum being present, I'm going to call the meeting to order, so everybody please take a seat. But actually, the first thing we're going to do is start by standing and saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and then please remain standing after we finish the pledge for a moment of silence in remembrance of Paul Wilson, who died last week in Danahy Park.
Madam Chair, and I like
Yes.
that we would also remember Miss Bessie Robinson, who recently died at the beginning of this year. Miss Robinson was a long time resident of Cambridge, ran a beauty parlor on Pleasant Street, raised a very large family there, and contributed greatly to this Cambridge community. She will be sorely missed.
I'm sorry. Okay. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Have a seat, everyone. Okay, we begin our meetings with public comment. Public comment is the time when members of the public may speak on any item on the agenda except for communications. And so and awaiting reports. So I hope most of you have already signed up to speak. I have a long list of speakers. I will call your name. You can come up to the podium, push the little button so that the green light is on, and then you'll have up to 3 minutes to speak. So our first speaker is Nate Fillmore, who does not appear to be here. Oh. Okay. I guess I need to do the submission of the record. So, Councillor Zondervan, you move to accept the submission of the record. Excuse me, for November 5th. Sorry, I'm being coached by the clerks here because I don't get much practice doing this. And I'll say that Mayor McGovern is detained on a personal matter, but I hope he'll be able to join us soon. So, continuing with public comment. No, I'm sorry. Oh, we have to vote. Oh, okay. You need to coach me better. We're voting to accept the record from the November 5th meeting. All in favor? Okay, thank you. Now can we do public comment? Yes. Okay. Is Nate Fillmore here yet? No. Okay, George Sneelock, you're next. Are you here? All right, come on up. Thanks.
George Schneelock, 81 School Street, Apartment 1 in Somerville, speaking on Policy Order 12. I'm very happy to see that the Cycling Safety Ordinance is up for its first vote today. Unlike the other bicycle-related policy orders which were discussed last year, which mostly focused on short-term solutions to specific streets, this ordinance would have a long-term positive impact on our street design. When the city talks about whether to put in protected bike lanes, the conversation is often about justifying their existence. Why should the city put in a protected bike lane? At the same time, it's taken for granted that car and trucks get priority and that parking spots are preserved. This mindset does not make sense in a dense urban city which is growing rapidly. When Cambridge prioritizes car travel, it prioritizes traffic jams and bitter, zero-sum fights about who gets what parking space and why. As the city gets more crowded, the necessity of protected bike lanes will be more apparent. The ordinance is an incremental measure to change this thinking. It requires the city to build protected bike lanes when the street is reconstructed, which is the most cost-effective time to do it. Streets are not reconstructed often, and it could take a long time before a network is built as the ordinance would require. Still, it sets a long-term priority which can be effective in changing the question from why build protected bike lanes to why not. I think most people in the city think that a future with more bicycles and fewer cars is a happier future for Cambridge. So we should be building infrastructure over the long term that would bring about this future. The ordinance document is only 2 pages, and the requirements section is only 2 paragraphs. The ordinance does not say anything about parking or about quick-build infrastructure. Nevertheless, the City Council should resist the urge to amend it substantially because its brevity is useful in making the ordinance clear and easy to follow. In the short term, the city still needs to build out its network of protected bike lanes, and it should aim to do this rapidly with quick-build techniques so that people's lives are not unnecessarily at risk when they travel around the city. Regardless of this ordinance, the City Council will still need to set policy to ensure this happens. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have a written copy of those comments, you can put them in the basket, or, okay, if you would like to email them to the clerk's attention before midnight, they'll be placed on the public record for this meeting. Thank you. Next speaker is Elizabeth Hodling.
Hello, my name, as you said, is Elizabeth Hodling. My husband, Phil Balboni, and I bought our house at 132 Brattle Street 33 years ago. To my knowledge, the city, which has been my home for most of the last 46 years, has not taken stock of the damage done to our neighborhood from the massive water main break early on Sunday morning, December 23rd. This lack of concern alone is shocking to a long-term resident. I'm also stunned that no warning was given as Brattle Street became a river and Mercer Circle a lake. We awoke to the sound of voices on the street at 4:10 a.m. There was a phalanx of fire trucks outside. A siren might have given people time to move their cars or rescue a family heirloom. Briefly, 6 cars were totaled and 8 homes flooded. 6 of the homes had their heating and hot water systems destroyed. 2 of my neighbors still have not been able to move back into their home. All of the houses had major damage requiring, just as a first step, massive water mitigation, which means in part opening all of the walls to prevent mold. Our basement is an important part of our home. It is or was finished space with a library, guest room, and gym. All the walls have to be re-sheetrocked, plastered, and painted. All carpets, rugs, and sofas were destroyed, as were many books and exercise equipment. We are fortunate that our insurance company seems willing to cover a substantial part of our cost. Many of our neighbors have been denied coverage. One question to everyone in this room, including the city manager and the councilors, is do you have specific flood insurance? If you don't, your insurance company will probably deny you any coverage if you are in the path of a water main break. I'm told that the pipe that burst was installed during the Grant administration and that it was last serviced while Eisenhower was in his first term. How is the damage inflicted on our neighborhood not the city's responsibility? And how can the city expect just a few residents to bear the brunt of its own failure? Thank you.
Thank you. I know everybody is sometimes tempted to applaud speakers, but we ask that we refrain from doing that just because we don't do that. But thank you. The next speaker is Deanne Ho, followed by John Kiparski. Thank you.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me be able to speak tonight. I'm a resident of Cambridge since 2007, and I want to speak in support of the cycling safety ordinance. I bike every day from my home in Cambridge to my office in Longwood Medical Area, and I've been doing it every day pretty much for the last 10 years, through the winters, through the summer. The reason I do it is because it is still the most convenient and reliable way to get across the river. Like me, many Cantabrigians have realized that cycling can be a very convenient way to get around the city. Between 2000 and 2013, the number of residential parking permits issued in the city of Cambridge has decreased by 7%, even though our residents' occupation has gone up. The number of households without cars have gone up from 28% to 31%. And among cities with over 100,000 people, Cambridge ranked number 1 in the country for percentage of people who get to work by either cycling or walking, ahead of Berkeley, California, ahead of Seattle, Washington, and ahead of, surprisingly, Portland, Oregon. The benefits of more cycling is obvious for everyone. The health benefits are well known. Studies from University of Glasgow shows that cycling can cut your risk for cancer and cardiovascular diseases by up to 50%. Improved quality, air quality is an obvious benefit of cycling. Just 1% fewer cars driving to work can improve air quality by 2 to 4%. It lessen congestion. Obviously, fewer cars owned and driven on the road means fewer parking spaces being fought after, and also fewer cars in traffic jam. We went from a 3-car household to 0 car, and a little part of me think there are 3 parking spaces out there that have my name on them. Of course, noise pollution also decreases as you have more cyclists on the street. In terms of local businesses, cyclists spend per capita per week more on local businesses than any other mode of transportation, including pedestrians, car drivers, and those who take transits. It creates more jobs. Building bicycle infrastructure is one of the most cost-effective way you can generate jobs. To build a short distance of cycle track costs less money than the Xerox budget for a highway project. Also increase property values. Houses, residents that are within a block or so of bike trails see their property values go up. And most importantly, it also narrows inequality within our city. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And thank you. And I should explain that little tone is your 15-second warning. But thank you. And if you would like to put those.
Yeah, may I do that?
Well, now you're down to 10 seconds. But
okay. Well,
but you can put the comments in the basket, and then we'll get them all.
It is super fast. I would like to think that there are areas in Cambridge that are accidents waiting to happen for cyclists. But the sad thing is that there are accidents that have happened in those intersections, and we really can do better as a community. I hope that you have the will and the intelligence, and I'm sure you do, to do what is good for the city of Cambridge in the long run. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And if you want to leave the written comments in the basket, that's great. See the little basket there? Thank you. Okay, next up is John Kiparski. Are you here? No. Then we will go to Carl Alexander.
Hi, good evening and happy 2019. As a Cambridge native and daily commuter through the city, I'm encouraged by the support shown for policy order number 12 tonight on the agenda supporting the cycling safety ordinance's referral to the ordinance committee. The city of Cambridge has done a gold level job in abiding by the League of American Cyclists 5 E's to building a bike friendly community. That's education, enforcement, encouragement, engineering, and evaluation and planning. And really, it's working towards a future less reliant on car transit. I think we all know that. The proposed ordinance will help to legitimize cycling infrastructure in the city's current approach to traffic engineering projects and move towards the assurance of a complete street standard and coherent protected cycling network for all ages and abilities within a reasonable time frame. My retiring parents want to start biking in the city. My future children want to bike in the city. This isn't for me. I bike daily now, so it's for the remaining interested but concerned population. Lastly, there's an emerging e-bike, e-scooters, electric wheelchairs that really need to be taken in consideration because currently they don't have a place in the right-of-way to move. So rethinking our streets in a way to ensure that low emission or emission-free modes of transit can move safely in our communities is essential at this point in time. So thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Next is Julia Holderness, followed by Lajos Hader.
Hi. Is it okay if I don't use the mic? Or?
No, it's better if you use the mic because we're being televised, and then that helps.
Okay, very good. All right. I'm audible? Okay. So, I'm being timed. Okay. So, hi. My name is Julia Holderness, and I live at 130 Brattle Street on the corner with Mercer Circle. Now I'm going to move back in time. The year is 1867. The Cambridge City Fathers see the need for safe, clean, reliable water in their ever-expanding, ultra-modern city. They meet, they bring in experts, and they spend money on something worthwhile, a shiny new water supply system, which they boast can pump up to 5 million gallons of water a day. Cut forward to the year 2018, December 23, about 3 in the morning to be precise. The once state-of-the-art water main on Craigie Street, which was laid back in 1867 and relined in 1954, as my neighbor Elizabeth Hoatling had mentioned, is now corroded to the breaking point. It does break, and millions of gallons of water rush down Craigie onto Brattle and down neighboring streets like Mercer Circle, where I live, and Sparks as well. The water mixes with trash, dog waste, and who knows what else. Then it floods the basements of my family and at least 7 other neighboring households. At least 5 cars are destroyed. And so are our basements. Mine was filled waist high with disgusting brown sludge. Several of my neighbors who are here had wastewater up to 5 feet high in their basements. The first responders who came were wonderful, wading through a freezing, filthy torrent to plug up the water main, clear the storm drains, and even rescue a neighbor from the 3rd floor where he was stranded in his home. Our whole community is very grateful to the first responders. But everything in this filthy water's path was laid waste, including valuable business servers, artwork, personal papers, and family heirlooms. And I'm speaking for the community as a whole about these particular matters. We and our neighbors lost our furnaces, our water heaters, and given the cold weather, our running water too, as we had to winterize our pipes in order to prevent them from freezing and bursting too. We spent a cold and smelly Christmas with no heat, unflushable toilets, and no showers. It was back to 1866 for us. It took close to 2 weeks to get the basement dry, cleared out, and clean enough to put in new systems. My garden overlooking Brattle Street is now filled with nasty waterlogged furniture, personal possessions, and muddy home appliances. Passers-by stop and stare, sometimes asking, "What happened? It looks like a hurricane hit your neighborhood." Good question. What did happen? Who is responsible? This was no act of God. This catastrophe was due to the inaction of man. The pipes should already have been replaced. So, for the majority of us, insurance refuses to cover the cost of the damage, stating that the water came from a city pipe outside our properties. The buck has to stop someplace. This is on the city. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you would leave your comments, then we'll have them in full. Thank you very much, Julia. Next is Lajos Haider, followed by Susan Redlick. Okay. Susan, are you present? Yes. Okay.
My name is Susan Redlick. I live at 19 Sacramento Street, and I'm here to submit some supplementary information about the new Green Deal order that you are considering this evening. And I was able to attend the town meeting held by Representative Catherine Clark back in December when she indicated 100% support for the Select House Committee on the Green New Deal. And at that time, she documented by explaining what the advantages would be for our area, for her district and her constituents. And two things jumped out at me. One was that this bill, or a bill that could be developed by this committee, would promote the upgrading of every residential and industrial building for state-of-the-art efficiency, comfort, and safety. And this is what our efforts in Cambridge are prioritizing to deal with the climate emergency. And the second part that it offers so much potential for employment is the jobs guarantee. And without going into all the details of it, I'm going to leave this with you to see the different objectives of a jobs guarantee that would allow for a lot more jobs and training geared to sustainability and climate preparedness and adaptation and work that would be at all levels, not just high tech. So I will leave this in.
Yes, thank you, Susan. Leave it for us. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Amy Flax, followed by Nicola Williams.
Hello, I'm Amy Flax, 86 Normandy Avenue, and I'm here to support policy order number 12. And I'd like to commend the city for the work that's been done with protected bike lanes, but this ordinance would allow for more bike lanes, more protected lanes, which is really important for those of us who ride bikes around the city. I've lived in the city for 40 years, and I've seen these changes over the last few years as very positive as a bike rider. I'm also a senior citizen, and to be riding in a protected lane is much more helpful and feels much safer, and evidence shows that people are more comfortable riding in protected lanes. So I think it will bring new and wonderful bike riders to the city, and it's very important. So I really commend you and thank you for the ordinance, and I very much support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Nicola Williams, are you here? Yes. And she'll be followed by Geeta Pradhan.
How many minutes do I have?
3 minutes, please.
Okay, great. So I have a lot to talk about, so a lot of policy orders to reference, so I'll go fast as I can. I really actually am very proud of the City Council for presenting all of these policy orders, so I'm excited about them. Number 5, I support, I think it's a creative way to fund the arts. However, I believe that the cannabis tax use should be treated the same way how tobacco use has been used, and there are good examples on the state level. So I think it should be funding health education targeted to youth and health consequences of cannabis if abused, as well as community health programs. But in general, I'm supportive of the direction. In terms of number 6, this is regarding the funds for 25% Central Square. I fully support this. I think it will stimulate economic development and provide much needed funds for underserved projects in Central Square. My only caution is that we need clear criteria and a fair process for receiving the funds, and transparency and oversight, which has not been really done in the Harvard Square model. Regarding number 7, I fully support that. However, I feel that the city has fallen short of fulfilling its obligations for the 1% ordinance of the arts, and so the city should retroactively replace the funds that were held and not appropriate for the 1% for the arts, and in fact increase it to 2%, and maybe we wouldn't have to be looking at hotel, motel, and cannabis tax. I think it's a good return on investment because $174 million from the arts is supported in the city. I also think that it should be managed by a independent organization like the Cambridge Community Foundation because they have the experience. Number 8, I support the Green Deal. Thank you. Number 10, I'm speaking on behalf of the Harvard Square Neighborhood Association. I'm on the board. My colleagues will also speak. We've shared communication. I think it's a great thing. I think we should also think about, for the transfer tax, homeowners, some exemptions like for homeowners. I feel that the use of funds should prioritize housing for people who live in Cambridge, as well as former Cambridge residents who have been displaced first, strengthen tenant protections and ombudsman for eviction prevention, and offer a comprehensive plan that is inclusive of constituents who may not qualify for federal subsidized housing, namely moderate income, middle income, artists, veterans, first responders, teachers, domestic violence survivors, and seniors. And additionally, I think the city should have a pathway for home ownership. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicola. If you want to leave those, you can, but they may be the same as what has already been emailed, so it's up to you. Okay. Thank you. And our next speaker is at the mic already. Hi, Geeta.
Good evening. My name is Geeta Pradhan. I'm the president of the Cambridge Community Foundation and a member of the Arts Task Force. The foundation is the local giving platform for Cambridge, supporting social equity, cultural richness, and shared prosperity We are located at 99 Bishop Allen Drive. And I'd like to speak in support of policies number 5, 6, and 7. I first want to applaud the Mayor and Councillor Mallon for initiating this very important work, particularly express our appreciation for the Council for the thoughtful and efficient work on behalf of the city, the big city community, the arts, and the arts community. As I mentioned, supporting cultural richness is one of Cambridge Community Foundation's core goals. We've been funding arts for our entire history since over 100 years. And since 2010, we have made about 1.5 million in grants as a way to teach education, foster economic development, community development, healing, but also arts for art's sake because of the value that it provides for the quality of life in Cambridge. For a city that has creativity and innovation in its DNA, we see arts as being crucial to fostering innovation and maintaining the amazing qualities that make Cambridge special. What results in innovation actually begins with arts, leads to creativity, the imagination, and then innovation. And arts is that first crucial step in exposing our children and our residents to the world of innovation. As you all know, Cambridge is a place of ideas. It's driven by our great universities, amazing cultural diversity in this city, and its ability to attract people from all over the world who come here to solve world problems, make scientific progress, negotiate global challenges, and enjoy a quality of life to which arts is a great contributor. We need to make sure that this community, that the members of this community are not just consumers of those great ideas, but actually are the contributors and the producers of those ideas. And for that, we think arts is a very important first step to engage. The arts animate this city. They help build connections, celebrate the joy of life, and promote a sense of well-being. Our city's great assets they range from the museums to music and dance venues, the visual arts that are seen in the murals and artist studios. They can be seen in the River Festival, the Science Festival, the Honk Festival, the Caribbean Festival, and many other creative ventures. You can see these in our vibrant cultural district in Central Square. It's a vibrant place with a mix of cultures, ages, age groups. It's a melting pot of the city. It's not just the culture, but also the city's historic district. In addition to all of these attributes, the importance of supporting these three ventures is that arts and culture are a robust sector of the city's economy, contribute over 174 million in economic impact for the city, of which 7 million is in revenues, and they support 125 arts organizations. In the interest of time, all I will say is that we strongly support all three of these measures. In particular, the revisitation of the cap on the Percent for Arts program, the importance of the Central Square Fund, to which the foundation has already contributed 50,000 to help foster the work on the murals and to continue to support the programming, which actually makes this vibrant and enables our artists to actually live, earn a livelihood and help them thrive. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak, and we look forward to a strong partnership with the city on all of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I'm going to get tougher on the deadline, but thank you. Our next speaker is Roberta Hall, followed by Seela Hobbs.
I live on 1 Mercer Circle and part of the water break situation. I live with Jack Hall, who has lived here 33 years. I've lived here 26. I would like to express the dramatic experience of waking up in the middle of the night to cars beeping and seeing what looked like Colorado Rapids flowing down our street. We watched water rising at an astonishing rate, with cars filling up. What followed were 3 days of pumping water out of our basement, 12 days without heat and water. Our furnace, water heater, and car have been replaced. Sadly, 20 paintings, which were being temporarily stored, representing 30 years of my artistic life, are damaged and destroyed. My husband's business servers were submerged, resulting in a loss of critical data. I'm highlighting just some of our possessions. I fear the infrastructure of our city is not adequate, and this might happen again. Worse, that the city might not provide compensation for a water system originally installed just after the end of the Civil War. Given the 120-year expectancy of a water main pipe, we are 32 years beyond the expiration date. Thank you.
Thank you. Sela Hobbs, followed by Itamar Turning Tuareg. Sorry, I'm always going to mess up that name.
Hi, Jan. Celia Wright Hobbs, and I live at 50 Spark Street, and I'm supporting the other stories of my neighbors with a story of our own. Imagine arriving home after Christmas vacation, and you're greeted by a cold, damp chill from lack of heat. You go to your basement door and are greeted by what looks like the after effects of a tsunami or earthquake. Your washer and dryer are 10 feet from their normal position, on their sides, tumbled on top of each other, with debris surrounding them in piles throughout the basement. Tables, desks, bottles are thrown over and scattered. Furniture and pictures are strewn everywhere. It's difficult to process. We lost everything in our basement. The furnace, hot water heater, and appliances were ruined, along with 30 years of objects and irreplaceable possessions stored there. I saw plastic file cabinets shelved 5 feet above the ground on shelves full of water. My husband lost all of his business records. As 30-year residents, we have lived through many 100-year storms. We are not new to water in our house and have taken precautions to have everything well off the floor. We, and probably no house in Cambridge, could possibly have prepared for a 5-foot onslaught of water caused by the city's maintenance neglect of the water main on Craigie. We have heard nothing from the city. We pay high taxes and are required to follow many strict building codes for any improvement to our homes. And yet the city of Cambridge seems to think it is okay not to maintain their own infrastructure properly and put its citizens' homes at risk. The city is responsible for this disaster, and we would appreciate a response. We deserve a response. Thank you.
Thank you. Itamar Turning. Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Itamar Turner Trowering. I live at 139 Oxford Street in Cambridge. I'm here to talk about the cycling ordinance, which I urge you to support. My daughter goes to school at King Open, and we're lucky enough that our route to school goes these days through 2 protected bike lanes, either Beacon Street in Somerville or the stretch of Cambridge Street that has a protected bike lane in Cambridge. But the King Open School is moving to the other end of Cambridge Street, and so our protection is going to go away, and we have to consider whether it's safe for us to bike with our daughter to school. And it'd be nice if she, when she's older, be able to bike to school on her own safely. And the problem is that the current network that we have is not really a network. There's a protected bike lane here, and then you switch to extremely dangerous infrastructure. And what we need is an actual connected network. You don't drive in your car on a nice road and suddenly have to fight through boulders and gravel. You have roads that connect everywhere, and the bike infrastructure should be the same so that everyone can bike safely everywhere. And Cambridge has the beginning of a plan to do this, and this ordinance would mean that when we rebuild roads, we would take that bike plan into account and build up the network. And so that's a really good starting point for making sure we have, by default, when we rebuild, safe infrastructure. And while I urge you to support it, this is also just, this is only a long-term solution because roads don't get rebuilt that often. And so in addition to supporting this ordinance, the city needs to use quick build measures as they did in Cambridge Street, which is not perfect, could be better, but has allowed us to bike safely with our daughter to school. And so we need both the ordinance and we need to use quick build measures like we did in Cambridge Street to build the whole bicycle network in the whole of the city so we have a connected network. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellen Schachter, followed by Robert O'Neill. No, Ellen? Okay. Robert O'Neill, are you here?
Robert O'Neill, 175 Hallworthy Street, Cambridge. Here to speak on calendar item number 1, the airplane noise reduction, formerly policy order number 3. I live immediately south of Fresh Pond, and many of the 33L departures fly directly over Fresh Pond to my house. The airplane noise reduces my quality of life and health in the use and enjoyment of my property, as well as the public's use of Fresh Pond Reservation. I strongly urge the City Council to not make any reference to the altitude-based 4,000-foot dispersion concept, nor any other alternative concept included in the MIT RNAV Block 2 update presentation for the following reasons. The MIT RNAV study is in progress. All the information in the update is preliminary. The cover letter used to distribute the update states, quote, we strongly urge the Massport Community Advisory Committee and its members to avoid drawing any specific conclusions from this preliminary material or using the material to advocate for or against any specific idea. Each relevant page of the update is stamped in bold red, quote, preliminary examples to evaluate methodology only should not be considered for representative case. An official policy advocating for an alternative flight concept is inconsistent with the stated purpose of including such concepts in the study update. Independently advocating for a specific flight concept risks derailing the tireless and effective efforts of those that got us to this stage of dialogue with the FAA and Massport. The FAA cannot work with or negotiate with individual communities for a solution to a regional problem. I strongly believe the solution will not be achieved if Cambridge or any community advocates for a solution independently. This approach may decrease the likelihood that the FAA will take any action at all. It must be kept in mind that the city is not in negotiations with the surrounding communities to reach a solution. Instead, all of the affected communities must work together with Massport CAC to agree on a technically sound position to present to the decision-making authority, the FAA, to achieve a fair regional solution. A policy order advocating for a specific flight pattern alternative is detrimental to the citizens of Cambridge plagued by the relentless airplane noise. However, it would be beneficial if the order simply requests the City Massport CAC representative to present to the City Council and the Cambridge citizens an update on the noise problem and the MIT study to A, inform more residents of the issues and complexities of the problem, B, provide more context to the information included in the study update, C, clarify the path forward, and D, explain the mechanism by which a regional position to be considered by the FAA will be formulated. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you want to leave your written comments in the basket, yes, great, thank you. Our next speaker is Alan Dworsky, followed by Ernest Tunissen. So, thank you.
Am I supposed to touch something?
No, it should. If the green light is on, you're on.
My name is Alan Dworsky. I've been a resident of Cambridge for 65 years. I've lived at 8 Mercer Circle for 51 years. For the last 10 years, my wife and I have given to the city of Cambridge over $1 million, and we've given it in the form of supporting an intense music program for the early grades in Cambridge elementary schools. In a month, most of us who have been affected by this breach probably will have remediated our facility, our homes and properties, but I'm concerned that at any time, thank you. I'm concerned that at any time there'll be another breach on Craigie Street, so we're continuing to be at risk. So my proposal is that what needs to be done is the cathodic monitoring system needs to be placed along the waterline on Craigie Street, but until that is done, I would ask that property taxes of those of us who have been affected by this breach be reduced by at least 50%. We'll still be at risk because it'll take a while for the cathodic system to be placed, and so we could have a breach even tomorrow. So we're at risk, and so this is the least that the city can do for us, is to reduce our taxes until the cathodic system is in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Ernest Tunissen. Sorry if I've mispronounced your name, followed by Barbara Goodchild.
It was pretty close. Thank you very much. I am also speaking as a neighbor of my fellow neighbors that was hit by the water incident on the 23rd of December. My wife and I are relative newcomers to this community. We bought this house 4 years ago. We completely renovated it. It was done 2 years ago. And in addition to significant damage that we incurred as well, and we are also not insured by our insurers, I wanted to express, in addition to what my neighbors have already said, frankly, my amazement at the city of Cambridge. We have been basically hit by this water caused by damage to property of the city of Cambridge, and we've not heard anything from the city of Cambridge. No email, no knock on the door, no mail, nothing at all. And that's quite puzzling to me. If I were to cause damage to any one of my neighbors or anyone in the world, frankly, I would reach out to them and say, I'm sorry, I take responsibility, let me help you make it better, but completely nothing. And apparently to the city of Cambridge, it's sort of normal to not communicate after causing damage. So that was the first thing that I wanted to express. The second thing is, in the cause of that renovation that I just described, we had to jump through enormous amounts of hoops for the city of Cambridge. We paid tens of thousands of dollars in permits. And certain things sort of made a lot of sense, certain things were a little bit inane, but we thought, hey, we move into a community that values quality, that values sort of accountability, and that values safety. And then I hear that this water main break was caused by, it was really old and not well maintained. It makes me wonder, how well is it maintained, and what are the processes that the city of Cambridge puts on itself? It's great to ask accountability from your citizens, but what is the accountability that is asked of the city of Cambridge itself? So I would like to urge the council to investigate this and address the issue of accountability and address the issue of communication and respond basically to what you heard from my fellow neighbors and myself, and really a plea for taking some responsibility in this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Barbara Goodchild, followed by Carolyn Fuller.
Hello, my name is Barbara Goodchild. I've lived in Cambridge for over 50 years, and for 23 years on Bowden Street, which is under one of the flight paths. Whenever there's a northwest wind from Logan Airport, they use runway 33L, the airplane noise is just relentless. If I go to bed at 10, the airplanes are going till after 11, sometimes till 12. They start at 5 a.m. But what I'm here to say is I back up Robert O'Neill, and this is about Policy Order Number 1, introduced by Vice Mayor Devereaux, Councillor Kelly, and Councillor Zondervan. And I think that it's too early to implement or recommend anything by the MIT study, MIT International Center for Air Transportation Study, and that when it is introduced, it should be shared by other communities and not just send the planes to other parts of Cambridge or to Medford, but everyone should sort of share the pain of all the airplane noise. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have written comments, you can leave them in the basket. Carolyn Fuller, followed by William McAviney.
Vice Mayor Devereaux and councilors. My name is Carolyn Fuller, and I live at 12 Douglas Street in Cambridge, in Central Square. I am here this evening as a homeowner and an activist in A Better Cambridge in support of Policy Ordinance Number 10 to begin the process towards establishing a real real estate transfer fee in Cambridge. I am supporting this fee because the fees will be earmarked for the Affordable Housing Fund, and I also think it will deter speculative real estate investing here in the city. And as an Airbnb host, I would also like to voice support for order number 4, the short-term rental taxes. If these taxes are enacted, I hope a hefty portion of both taxes will also be earmarked for affordable housing and not just the state-mandated 35% of any community impact fees. And finally, as an avid walker and someone who wants to see fewer cars on our streets, I support order number 12. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill, you're next.
Vice Mayor Devereaux and councilors, my name is Bill McAvaney. I live at 12 Douglas Street, and I'm a homeowner there. I'm also on the board of the community housing advocacy group, A Better Cambridge, and I'm here to speak. As a homeowner, I'm totally in support of policy order number 10, and A Better Cambridge is also in support of policy order number 10. Homeowners in Cambridge have experienced a financial windfall, a jackpot they realize when they sell. Meanwhile, renters, especially low-income renters, are being displaced from their homes in droves, paying the human cost of rising housing prices. A real estate transfer tax dedicated to affordable housing will go a small way towards righting this inequity. I think it would be immoral of us to not pass this real estate transfer tax. I recommend that the threshold be lower, something like $1 million. I myself own a home now estimated to be worth $1.2 million, which represents a gain of roughly $650,000. I feel we and other homeowners should be obliged to share our windfalls with our community. After all, our community is largely responsible for making our location such a desirable place. Moving on, speaking as both a homeowner and a host of short-term rentals, I support policy order number 4. Getting the now authorized taxes on short-term rentals needs to move forward quickly so we can use this revenue as well to help with our housing crisis. When it's time for the details, I urge you to put far more than what is mandated of this revenue stream into affordable housing. And finally, I support policy order number 12. I already feel safer in Cambridge with the improvements made in the last year or so, but bicyclists are still dying on our streets. We need to make these improvements more permanent and expand them. Thank you for addressing these issues.
Thank you. Mark Boswell, followed by Ann Porter. Mark isn't here. Ann Porter, I believe you're here.
Excuse me, I have it written on my phone there. Hi, my name is Ann Porter. I live at 6 Mercer Circle, and I was a lucky person who was 12 feet from the tsunami. And it was really a tsunami rather than a flood because my neighbors had no warning whatsoever that part of their lives were going to be destroyed while they slept. But my husband and I and my neighbors across the street were very lucky we were saved. What I did see, though, was the effect of this shock on my neighbors. I'm a clinical social worker, and I've done work with crisis intervention quite often. And I've been shocked, very shocked, that the city had no thought of or method of reaching out to people who really were the victims of a disaster. It was a small disaster, it was encapsulated, it was only 8 houses, but for them, it was a disaster, it was a shock, and they were very traumatized. I don't mean to speak for them if they think they weren't, but my impression was that my friends were absolutely overwhelmed at first by something that they never expected. And I'm wondering if the city does have a program for intervention in crises. And I'm wondering if our little community was just too small to trigger it, or whether there isn't such a thing. But I think there should be. Not a single person from the city came to offer solace, comfort, coffee, blankets, I don't know, whatever. There was no, we were alone, and the good news is that it made us into a real community. But the bad news is that I think we lost a lot of faith in our larger community. In terms of negligence, I'd like to say that I was born in 1940, and I get regular checkups. And this pipe was born in 1867, and its last checkup was in 1954. So I think that is just so negligent and so shocking. My last point is that how can you guarantee that tomorrow the same thing is not going to happen to our little circle? That the rest of this main is not going to break? That we aren't going to wake up again with the same problem? And how can we fix that as quickly as possible? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Betsy Eichel, followed by Janie Katz-Christie.
You said my name correctly. I appreciate that. My name is Betsy Eichel, and I'm a resident of Cambridge. I also spent years as a tenant advocate, and I'm here for policy order number 10. I also spent years as a tenant advocate, so issues of housing affordability are dear to me both personally and professionally. I'm speaking today in favor of a real estate transfer fee. Though I now reside in East Cambridge, I previously lived in Cambridgeport. I love the city and truly believe there is no other place like it. I feel so privileged to be back here after 7 years in New York. However, it would be difficult for me to live here again were it not for my partner, who makes significantly more money than I do. I am also a social worker in the nonprofit sector. Cambridge was not cheap by any measure in 2008, but it is even more out of reach now. My concern about housing prices is not limited to my personal experience, but rather what kind of city Cambridge may become if there is not more dedicated investments in affordable housing and meaningful tenant protections. In order for a city to remain as unique and exciting as Cambridge is, it must be welcoming to people of all backgrounds and incomes. If we do not do anything to increase our ability to build housing that is truly affordable, Cambridge will become accessible only to the highest earners, and that will no doubt impact the culture and vitality of the city. We also need to do whatever we can to stem rampant speculation. Housing is a human right, is not merely another commodity that investors can buy and sell with no mind to consequences. We have a moral obligation to make anonymous, limited liability corporations pay more for buying up housing, which often sits vacant while homelessness surges. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to leave your comments, good. Thank you. Janie Katz-Christie? No. Okay. Adriana Poole, followed by Jessica Drew.
Good evening. My name is Adriana Poole. For full disclosure, I'm a Belmont resident, so I'm not sure if that's okay. You'll allow me? Okay. I am speaking regarding the airplane noise. I think it's policy number 3. I'm reaching out to you on behalf of the citizens group Boston West Fair Skies, and also as a private citizen regarding the policy order number 3 and its 2 versions to be discussed today. I'm a Belmont resident and have worked since October 2013 within Boston West Fair Skies on advocating for a regional solution that will bring fair skies to all communities affected by 33L RNEV. Supporting the 4,000 feet option is in direct conflict with the MIT RNEV recommendations at this point in time. At the December 2018 meeting, Cambridge Council meeting, when the policy order was first introduced, Mayor McGovern asked if the Cambridge MCAC, Massport Community Advisory Committee representative, was consulted. The answer was that he was not consulted before the policy order was written. The FAA, Massport, and MCAC have a process in place for the MIT RNEV study. We need to go through the stages of this process. This is critical, especially in this phase. Boston West Fair Skies has worked tirelessly since October 2013 when it was created, and the MIT study is a direct result of the coordinated work we did with the CAC. The solution, however, has to be a regional one, where everybody shares the noise burden, and the noise is not shifted from one community to the other. After we became aware of the Policy Order 3, we asked our MCAC representatives from various towns what consequences the 4,000 feet option would create. Their response was unanimous. It would shift the noise to parts of Cambridge, and also, more significantly, to Medford, a city who is already burdened unfairly due to the creation of Tech Waypoint. I urge you to remove the 4,000 feet language from the policy order and only keep the language related to supporting the MIT RNF study. Working together and not against each other at this critical phase of the process, following the recommendation of the MIT team, MCAC, and Massport, will give us the only chance at achieving a solution for airplane noise relief, fair skies for all 33 RNF communities. And I would add also that just 2 years ago, another study failed. It had recommendations that would have benefited all because communities couldn't agree to it. So we don't want to repeat the history. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Drew, followed by Alex Van Pra.
My name is Jessica Drew, and I am a staff attorney at Cambridge and Somerville Legal Services, located at 60 Gore Street. Specifically, I work in the housing unit, representing tenants in both Cambridge and Somerville, and I am urging you to support policy number 10. In my official capacity, I represent tenants who are facing eviction through no fault of their own, specifically because their landlords are choosing to sell their property to developers, turn their rental units into condos, as well as to increase the rent beyond what my clients can afford. I see firsthand the great need of affordable housing in the city, and I'd like to share some stark statistics with you. Mainly, in fact, 47% of all Cambridge Housing Authority tenant-based subsidy voucher holders currently are leasing a unit outside of the city of Cambridge, not because they don't want to be here, but simply because they cannot afford to be here. Specifically, on June 26, 2018, the Cambridge Housing Authority provided statistics showing that over 19,808 applicants are looking for housing in both their public housing, their vouchers, as well as single-room occupancy. In October 3rd, 2016, the Cambridge Housing Authority opened its Housing Choice Voucher waitlist for the first time in over 8 years. After they had opened that list, they found that 7,898 applicants were applying for housing in the first month after opening that wait list. The Cambridge Housing Authority has also observed that once their public housing wait list was reopened as of August 1st, 2018, they had received 2,344 applications during their initial month-long lottery period. As you can see through these statistics, there are a number of individuals who are looking for housing in the cities of Cambridge and unfortunately are not able to do so because the Housing Authority is at capacity and the wait lists are extremely long. Individuals who are on the wait list also have difficulty finding housing even after they've attained a subsidy. It's observed that over 50% of those individuals who come up on the wait list and actually get a subsidy end up losing their subsidy because they simply can't find a place to use their voucher here in the city of Cambridge. Cambridge attracts people from all over the world for their universities, colleges, and job opportunities, resulting in a tight real estate market. This transfer fee, which I'm urging you to support, is not going to change that. Developers have voiced concerns that this is going to stifle the real estate market, but I would argue that it's not going to have that effect because this city attracts millions of people worldwide. For this reason, I am urging you to support policy number 10 for the affordable transfer fee. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. If you want to leave your written comments in the basket, you may. Next speaker is Alex Van Pra, followed by Stephen Strenio.
Hello, Vice Mayor Devereaux, City Councilors. My name's Alex Van Prague. I live at 95 Antrim Street and have done so with my family for, 15 plus years. I am here to voice enthusiastic support and appreciation for Public Orders 5, 6, and 7, especially 7, taking up the issue of full implementation of the 1% for the arts ordinance, which has been on the books since 1979. It is my understanding that at some point prior to this current administration, and even the one before it, the city may have had budgetary challenges that led to a cap being implemented on the 1% for art. However, as a Cambridge citizen and architect who's practicing within the city, it's also my understanding that ordinances must be respected and adhered to unless there's some process by which variances can be granted. The bottom line is this ordinance is on the city books. It's law and it needs to be implemented. The ordinance is also refreshingly simple and clear. Prior to serving on the Public Arts Council, I was not aware of it. I'm just going to read 2 sentences from it. All requests by city departments for appropriations or other authorizations for construction projects from eligible funds shall include and set aside an amount equal to no less than 1% of the total estimated costs of such projects for art. Copies of such requests, authorizations, applications, proposals, or appropriations shall be delivered by the city departments or agencies responsible for obtaining eligible funds to the Cambridge Arts Council as early as possible in the planning stages of the project. So it's great. There is terrific people on the Cambridge Arts staff who work diligently with other city departments trying to maximize the effectiveness of all the funds that are allocated towards the arts. An arbitrary cap of any amount is counter to this ordinance. Larger projects with larger 1% art budgets are just the sort of opportunities that can allow cities like Cambridge to really up its game in terms of public arts. The 1% should be seen as an investment in the city and its citizens. It improves our civic spaces, and successful projects are investments that can pay back many times. They're all part of making a city that people want to live in and visit, and they can enrich not only local businesses, but the local culture and the quality of life of its citizenry. So, thank you. Thank you very much for taking this initiative seriously, and I look forward to seeing the full implementation of the 1% for arts.
And thank you. Stephen Strenio, followed by Laura Runkle.
Hi, I'm Stephen Strenio. I'm here speaking today in support of policy orders 5, 6, and 7 having to do with funding for the arts. Just as a general notion, improving the arts in a city makes the city a better place. People like to have arts available to them, and this requires investment from the government. This is an investment that tends to pay off. The arts is one of the biggest industries in our country, including nationally over $760 billion annually, more than agriculture, transportation, or warehousing. In addition, as we all know, Cambridge is an expensive place to live and to work. I don't know anyone currently making art in the city who doesn't have more than one job in order to pay the bills. Many of them don't even end up making enough to be able to live here. So in order to have the sort of city that we want, which is full of art and economically thriving, we should continue to invest in our city's arts, and policy orders 5, 6, and 7 are a great way to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Laura Runkle, followed by Marilee Meyer. Laura, no? Marilee, you're here? Oh, wait, is that, that's, okay.
Hi, Marilee Meyer, 10 Dana Street, and I'm speaking in support of the transfer tax in principle as a way of supporting affordable housing. Because Cambridge has already met its housing quota for the next 10 years or thereabouts, perhaps it's time to slow down, build at any cost, and identify proposals this fund could support. Many bullet points were made in the 2017 Comprehensive Housing Plan, but I am struck by how many issues already identified lay fallow in legislation. This would include finding ways for tenant protection and eviction prevention already in affordable housing. With this new fund, identified traditional neighborhood housing to purchase and add to land trust, create partnership subsidies and a pathway to ownership and social mobility, preserve 3-bedroom units, even add new units behind traditional housing, and this should be all be targeting speculators, developers, and corporate landlords. Many of those displaced fall through the cracks because they are either too successful or not successful enough to qualify for various social programs, and none of these cases make it to the courts to be counted. We are losing moderate and middle-income residents, teachers, elderly, veterans, artists. Priority housing should go to those living and working in Cambridge and those who are recently displaced and want to return. A citizen committee and advisory board should also oversee the funds, and citizens should be part of any review of big projects and a part of what this tax would generate. In putting new development on hold, we can work with the current and tweaked zoning relating to height setbacks and look for a way to preserve the affordable housing already here, add these funds to Community Preservation Act, and even use a hotel tax, which would probably, I feel, would be better used in housing than the arts as it stands. Demand better design that would take context into account and design around significant trees for a better design and incorporate them into the property. But more importantly, find a way to have vulnerable renters maintain and voice their security. It is not hard to follow recent sales in the Globe and take tally of units changing hands. While many are individual, in 1 week we saw 22 bedrooms in 4 multiple unit buildings get sold. This might be a good place to start tracking what is happening to our housing stock. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilee. Next speaker is James Williamson, followed by Suzanne Blier.
Thank you. I want to speak to policy order number 12. I live at 1000 Jackson Place in North Cambridge. First of all, in the text of the whereas portion of the policy order, the second one says the Cambridge Bicycle Plan adopted in 2015. I think everybody involved in this deserve clarification of what that actually means. Adopted by whom? How? When? Was it adopted by a vote of the City Council? Who was it adopted by exactly, and what does that mean? I was informed tonight that, and I've had conversations with her myself, that Suzanne Rasmussen at one point said, well, it's aspirational. And of course, she's a key figure in this, so is it aspirational? Or, I mean, if it says adopted, what does that mean? Then that is immediately followed by the sentence, and currently undergoing further revision. Now, if this is currently undergoing further revision, shouldn't we all be part of that process? Shouldn't there be meetings happening around the city, not just a committee hearing on the text that's attached to this, but shouldn't there be meetings throughout the city where people have an opportunity to understand and participate in the process of revision? Or is it just going to be presented after the committee hearing and after the language is adopted, then we'll find out what the revisions are? Obviously, that should be something that we all have a meaningful opportunity to participate in. Then there is language, ridership will also allow the city to pursue parallel objectives in improved health for cyclists, especially seniors. Now, yeah, there are going to be some seniors who are going to be riding bicycles, but I think it's time for a little bit of, honesty and realism here. The vast majority of seniors are not going to be riding bicycles in the city of Cambridge as their principal way of getting around. Walking, taking buses, that's really where the majority of seniors are going to be getting around, maybe driving cars as well. With that in mind, why don't we, and as a separate related matter, why don't we have a bus plan in this city? We have only a bicycle plan and everything is judged against the bicycle plan. Why don't we develop and have a bus plan, and the bus plan is parallel with a bicycle plan, and synergies are examined and evaluated, and then, among other things, we don't have the problem of seniors having to face crossing protected bicycle lanes to get to bus stops, just as one example. So I think this needs to be more carefully examined. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Suzanne Blier, followed by Deborah Rue.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Devereaux and councilors. My name is Suzanne Blier. I live at 5 Fuller Place. And I want to begin by urging you to do whatever you can to help my neighbors on Mercer Court. This sounds just like Mercer Circle, a really difficult situation. At the outset, I want to say that I support the Green New Deal, the bicycle plan, and the representation of councilors on public projects. I think this is critical for citizen input as well. I'm an art historian by training and a strong advocate for the arts, and I'm the recent president of the National Association of Artists, Art Historians, and Designers. And I don't think that one could find a more strong advocate almost anywhere. I know that the new arts policy orders came about in part because of the problems with EMF and the issues of housing for artists in Cambridge, and I would strongly support that. They are among the poorest financially of our residents. I also would support strong international competitions for the arts so that Cambridge reaches a level of its real potential nationally and internationally. I don't, however, support the use of hotel taxes in this regard for the arts. I think that those might be better for other critical issues such as K through 12. I would support strongly the actual use of the 1% to 2% from developments and urge oversight on that. I wouldn't support the use of the marijuana tax either for the arts. I think that could help the homeless. I think we need to look at the specific forms of taxation and see where that is coming from. Now, in my last few minutes, I'd like to talk about HSNA, the Harvard Square Neighborhood Association, and the issue of number policy order 10. We support it, but with important aspects that we would love to see included, including the maintenance of current citizen rights and city regulations, an emphasis on the inclusion of cross economic groups within affordable housing, strong definitions of what is affordable, and a primacy placed on existing housing stock, current city residents, and the interest of universities, our interest in universities in housing their undergraduate, graduate, postdoctoral, and burgeoning faculty staffs in Cambridge or elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Deborah Rue, followed by Allison Cook.
Good evening, Councilor, Vice Mayor Devereaux, and councilors. I'm Deborah Rue. I'm a resident of North Cambridge on 7 Pines Avenue and the executive director of Justice Start Corporation, a provider, one of the nonprofit providers of affordable housing in Cambridge. And I'm speaking today in favor of Policy Order 10 in the real estate transfer tax. I don't need to lecture you about the need for affordable housing in our city and our surrounding communities. We all too well know that. I'm more distressed that 3 years later there's been nothing done on this. So I hope that in 3 years' time to see this actually enacted instead of standing here again. So 2 points I wish to make about the concept. And one is that I hope there's an exception baked in that if the sale of the property is to someone who's developing affordable housing, it would be waived. And the second is I would lower the limit from 2 million down to at least 1.5. I'm a proud homeowner. I have the pleasure of having a house that's now worth 4 times what I paid for it. And at last appraisal, fair market value was $1.5 million. I would happily pay if I decided to transfer or sell my property. So I think you should lower it down below the $2 million. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Deborah. Allison Cook, followed by Charles Franklin.
Hi, I'm Allison Cook. I live at 2 Mercer Circle, and I'm here along with my neighbors to testify to December 23rd, being woken up by firefighters at 4:30 in the morning to see a raging river coming down my street and watching my cars engulfed in water, and they are gone. The firefighters asked us to look in the basement that early in the wee hours, and we did, and we saw water lapping up the 5th stair of our basement. In the morning, we saw all of our mechanicals of our house floating, along with, I would say, over a decade of filed papers of intellectual work gone. We did not have heat or water for 2 weeks. And we just got hot water today. It's January 7th. This happened on the 23rd. I would say also a significant loss here is the amount of time that is really just beginning to recover from this process. I am self-employed and I have lost 2 weeks of work and counting, just trying to manage this. I would like to just read a statement from my husband who couldn't be here tonight. His name is Dr. David Hirsch. He writes, I am a person who's lived and worked in Cambridge my entire adult life. I have worked for the Cambridge Hospital my entire career. I was the longest serving medical director of Cambridge Healthcare for the homeless. I love Cambridge and feel proud to be a citizen of this great city. As one might imagine, it was deeply upsetting, unsettling, and surprising to experience the city's flood. This foreseeable catastrophe is a gross violation of the city's social compact. Although saddened by the event and disappointed by the response, I am confident that the city will do what is right for our neighborhood. In my experience, Cambridge will uphold its traditions, ensure its social compact, and make this right. I have confidence in my city's responsible approach to its citizens, and I have confidence in its leaders. Thank you for your consideration in helping us recover from this water main break.
Thank you. Charles Franklin, followed by Patrick Barrett.
Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I cannot overstate the importance of art for the community, art for education. It adds quality and character to the city. It stops the city from being sterile like other places that are highways, or what is that place that they just built in Somerville? I can't remember, but there's a movie theater there and it's really sterile and boring. Assembly Row, yes, it's a very boring, sterile place. Art is very important, and we have public libraries and public schools. I think it's time to have a public art gallery. Perhaps it's something that could be explored. In terms of the transfer tax, I think that's a good idea. 0.5% is nothing compared to all the other fees you have to pay. The real estate agent fee might be 6%. Like, that's 12 times what this tax is going to be, and it could vary by 2 or 3%. It's 0.5% is nothing. Definitely do that. The Green New Deal, I love that phrasing. It's cool. Absolutely need to support this. There's not enough happening in the federal government right now to support the environment. I don't have to say why. But but we need to do that local support here, and we could probably do some more actions here as well, not just words. And finally, on biking, definitely support that. I think it's one way to make sure that the city does follow through with this plan. It will force their hand. I personally don't bike in the city because when I do, I have way too many near misses and it scares me. So it's too dangerous for me. You know, more power to everyone who does. I don't. So that needs to be safer. That needs to be fixed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles. Patrick Barrett, are you with us tonight? Okay. He may be outside. Next speaker signed up is, I'm sorry, I apologize in advance for how I'm going to, okay, just in the nick of time. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Patrick, 41 Pleasant Street. I just want to say thank you to Councillor Mallon for activating something that I introduced into zoning 2 years ago, vis-a-vis the Central Square Fund. I would highlight that that fund always was meant, in my mind, as it works in Harvard Square, to be supplemental. We've had a cultural district for 7 years. We've never had any funding for it. I mean, come on. So that's the best argument I can think of is, come on. You know, it's great that people are interested in Central Square now. It's great that people are engaging. I think that whether it be 25% of the arts or whatever, the way we originally had written it was that it would be adjudicated by the Central Square Advisory Board. I don't think that that's a flawed system. I think it would work, but we need that development has to come to feed into that before it becomes something that can be used. Another policy order that I wanted to talk about was the short-term rental. I feel like I'm in two different worlds because I'm building a hotel, full disclosure. I also have an Airbnb that's registered with the city. I think you should extract funds from these things. However, the way that the current ordinance is written, there's a lot of bad actors and it's almost impossible for ISD to adjudicate it. It's impossible for ISD to know all the ones that are out there, and the biggest offender currently, Watermark 1 and 2 in Kendall Square, 10% of their housing stock is Airbnb. 10% of what they built. They're currently building Mass and Main, which I was for. If I find out that they're doing 10% there, I will feel nothing but lied to. So the short-term rental ordinance needs to be tightened up considerably. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think people should be able to share in that economy, but ultimately, people are taking advantage of our good nature. Airbnb is taking advantage of our good nature, and there are more services than just Airbnb. And because Airbnb is on everyone's radar, everyone's sort of going to these other sites now that are off the radar. And again, I don't have a problem with people using it. I think it's actually a great service. My wife and I, when we travel, we use Airbnb all the time because they tend to take kids, and you can, you know, it's an easier situation. Way easier than the hotel I'm building. That thing is small. You know, I think it's, you know, time, given Airbnb's reluctance to participate, to revisit it. And to make sure that Mass and Main, as they're building, are not doing what they're currently doing at Watermark 1 and 2. And ISD needs help. I think you know, having one person walk the street trying to figure out who's doing what is just impossible. The real estate transfer tax, you guys need a home rule petition. We'll fight a later day on that one. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Next speaker is Mahesh Viswanathan, followed by Patrick Braga. Goodbye. But stick around. Wait, do we have Mahesh here ready to speak? Okay.
Hello, I'm Mahesh Viswanathan, 40 Bristol Street, Cambridge, Mass, apartment 3. I am against the transfer fee, item 10. I'm an immigrant. I came here with nothing. I've been here in Cambridge for 16 years. I've been paying taxes. I own multifamily property over here. I've converted it, which helps me, but also increases my taxes by double, which is good for all. I take care of my home, I take care of my property, I pay my mortgage, I have tenants, I take good care of them, giving them a great Cambridge experience. This helps to make this also helps to make Cambridge a magnet city. And this causes property values to rise, and I think we can all agree that rising properties are sort of better than the opposite. Yes, rent is high, and we need to find a way to be more inclusive, but I'd prefer the government to not dip its hands into my pocket any more than it already does. Why is the knee-jerk reaction always to raise taxes? Can't we get more creative than that? Cambridge is jokingly called the People's Republic. As a reminder, in the good old USSR, the government would simply dump people into your apartment and you just had to share it with them. While the basic idea, equality and housing for all, was laudable, the execution didn't go all that well. Let's keep the joke a joke and not go down that slippery slope. Speaking of housing for all, isn't this a little bit of lip service? After the giant fire on Berkshire Street in East Cambridge, which came within 2 houses of mine, the people affected were housed temporarily in a sports facility. Funds came pretty quickly from neighbors and also from via crowdsourcing and also from public sources, which is all very admirable. And yet we have homeless people in Central Square right now, right down the street over here. So do we want to not be a magnet city for the homeless? Is there a baseline eligibility for citizenship to be taken care of over here? So I just see a lot of inconsistencies here. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick Braga, followed by Sergei Tettelbaum.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Braga. I'm an urban planning master student. I'm an urban planning master student at Harvard and a resident of Cambridge on Everett Street, and I'm speaking on Policy Order 10. I'm quite hesitant about the real estate transfer fee, and I'm not sure that it's an appropriate source of funding for subsidizing affordable housing. And so I'd like to share some of the concerns on my mind. I recently attended a city housing information session and was impressed by the wide range of support options available to subsidize housing. Yet at the end of the day, if multi-unit property becomes more expensive to purchase, then renters will bear the burden of increased prices, since housing is a highly inelastic good. Not to mention that if an LLC owns property, it's certainly possible that the owners can transfer interest in the corporation that owns the property, even though that has its own liability risks, and avoid paying the transfer tax altogether. At the very least, if the city does go forward with it, the city should make exceptions to projects that do include housing up to 100% of area median income. As a renter who recently completed a housing search and was shocked by the outrageous prices in the city, I might more readily support funding sources such as development exactions proportional to the increase in housing demand generated, say, by new commercial development. However, a policy focus that I would firmly support is making our system of zoning more predictable, less discretionary, and based on the existing physical fabric that already exists and thrives in Cambridge, and meanwhile also making the development review process far faster. When construction and land costs are so high and when development review is lengthy and expensive, newly built units will be expensive without subsidies. Yet allowing more subdivisions of existing buildings throughout the city or allowing small secondary units can help to add to the supply of naturally occurring moderate and middle income housing in Cambridge. Cambridge should take a cue from Minneapolis and allow all residential structures in the city to house 3 units by right and with no mandated parking. It's also disheartening in our tight housing market to see fellow Cantabrigians oppose new housing, subsidized or not, even if it reflects the prevailing building types that make Cambridge such a lovely place to live in. Specifically, I was troubled to learn of the Save Huron group in West Cambridge, arguing that they can, quote, keep Cambridge neighborly, end quote, by keeping out new neighbors. This group opposes 5-story buildings at the Huron and Concord intersection, even though beautiful examples of 4- and 5-story apartment buildings are scattered throughout the city, right next to single-unit detached houses, duplexes, townhouses, and a whole array of building types. So in short, I certainly applaud the city's wide-ranging efforts to provide more affordable housing, but I urge you not to make real estate even more expensive in our city. Rather, embrace our population growth and use the impressive precedents in our existing built environment to enable more of the dense, low and mid-rise buildings that make Cambridge such a unique place. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to leave your written comments in the basket, you may. Next speaker is Sergei Tettelbaum, followed by Heather Hoffman.
Yes, hi and Happy New Year. Yeah, I learned about, well, I'm talking about policy order number 10, and I learned about it last minute, like
Excuse me, sir, if you could speak.
Oh, yes, okay.
Yeah, that's
yeah, sorry, yeah. And I learned about that last minute, and my wife and I just walked here, so I didn't have time to like prepare, write down these things. But I think that, and I'm an immigrant myself. I came to this country from the Soviet Union over 40 years ago, and well, a lot of Soviet Union was all about affordable housing and taking money from the rich to give it to the poor, and that didn't work very well, especially for the poor. So I'm against this policy order number 10, use sales tax. I think a few things. I think it subverts and goes around Proposition 2.5. It seems like it's not a community-wide responsibility, and instead it goes to like very few. It could be for somebody who is buying and want to move to Cambridge and buy it. Was like my children are in this situation. It would make it could be much harder because they would like whatever. It's difficult to get a mortgage, but then in addition they will have to cover this additional cost which banks would not provide. And it's, well, the other thing that as a source of revenue, it's kind of like very iffy because property goes up and down. But all in all, I looked at that and I just want to voice my opinion that seems not to be a good decision. I didn't have time to write it down. If I could write down something, email here, I would appreciate it. Maybe it's too late.
If you would like to write down your comments and email them to the clerk before midnight, they'll be placed here.
I'll try.
She'll give you a card to give you the email address, sir, if you would like it. Okay. Heather Hoffman, followed by Lee Ferris.
Hello, Heather Hoffman, 213 Hurley Street. And I wanted to start out with a very short reference to the Green New Deal. As we all know, the original New Deal brought tremendous growth to this country, and it's been under attack, but I hope we can shore that up and add a Green New Deal, which I think will do even more good things for the country. So I am glad to see the City Council supporting that. Now I wanted to talk about something nobody else has talked about, which is the birth certificates. I think that this is a tremendously wonderful thing. People don't need more trauma when they're going through this, and to make it easier for people to get IDs and other things that that reflect the person that they're presenting as is the right thing to do. And I hope that you will encourage the Commonwealth to do this as well, because there are only so many people born in Cambridge. The vast majority of the people in the Commonwealth weren't and won't be. And I greatly support the arts, as you all know, and I would love to see an actual 1% for the arts. I was unaware that the interesting Cambridge arithmetic extended to the arts beyond its previous application in affordable housing. And then I wanted to talk for a moment about the transfer fee. I've suggested in the past that I think that there are logistical issues to this. Perhaps you'd have to do something like what Boston does with the Traeger stamps, which is get people to take their deeds down to City Hall, pay over the money, and get a stamp. Because asking the Registry of Deeds to collect this on behalf of the City of Cambridge, I mean, you aren't going to want things to get recorded before this gets paid, or you'll never see it. Just think about the logistics. And I would also suggest that having a floor amount of money after which it's imposed is not a good way to set this up. I think that you should consider whether anyone should be exempt, whether perhaps a particular amount should be exempt, for example, the way the residential tax exemption works. But I think that this will require a little more thought in order to come up with something that will be fair and actually usable. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. We have Lee Ferris followed by Beth Wang.
Good evening, Lee Ferris, 269 Norfolk Street. Many thanks to Councilors Carlone, Siddiqui, and Mayor McGovern for sponsoring the order on a real estate transfer fee. Thanks also to Councilor Toomey for sponsoring prior orders. The Cambridge Residents Alliance has supported a real estate transfer fee for years. We say that a transfer fee would generate significant revenue for affordable housing while also deterring speculative real estate investing here in the city. I'm also a member of the Envision Housing Working Group, which strongly supported a transfer fee, and we recommended funding for affordable housing be increased to $20 million annually starting this year. The transfer fee would be one key way to increase funding for affordable housing to that level. I'm interested in the approach that Somerville took, which exempts resident homeowners and home buyers, and that would meet the concerns expressed by a couple of property owners today. Somerville has a 1% fee on the seller and a 1% fee on the buyer. Somerville has no exemption on price, such as $2 million. I think it would be good not to have a price exemption, because if we want to deter speculation, it would be good to have a fee on a non-resident buyer, for example, of a $700,000 condo, to encourage selling the condo instead to a resident buyer. And I should say here that I am a homeowner of a two-family, so if there were no price exemption, it would affect me when I go to sell my property. I hope that the council will pass this order unanimously and that city staff will respond quickly. I'd like to begin the conversation about the specifics of our home rule petition as soon as possible, with the hope of passing it at the State House this year. I want to mention that I'm glad to see support for this transfer fee from other organizations like ABC and Harvard Square Neighborhood Association. And since I have a minute remaining, I want to express support for order number 1 on having gender X on birth certificates. Number 4, the short-term rentals revenue. I hope that all the revenue from that will go to affordable housing and tenant protections. I also support number 8 for a Green New Deal. Number 9 on the water mains. Those folks sound like they've been through hell. I hope it never happens to me. Number 12 on the cycling safety ordinance. I am a cyclist. Number 13 on the Volpe project updates. And number 14 to have a counselor on the committees for major buildings. Lastly, thanks to all the sponsoring counselors for your orders. Good evening.
Thanks, Lee. Beth, you're up, and then David DeCellis.
Hi, good evening. My name is Beth, and I live at 122 Berkshire Street in Wellington, Harrington. I'm speaking in favor of policy order number 10, which really seems like a modest proposal that would allow Cambridge to lead on affordable housing, which is a statewide crisis. Honestly, I've been a Cambridge resident for 2.5 years. It's honestly the nicest place I've ever lived, whether it's the access to good jobs, as an avid runner, the green space that's available, the high level of civic engagement, and the mix of families, students, and young people and longtime residents really make Cambridge a great place to live, of course, if you can afford it. When I first moved here after paying my broker fee first month, last month, and security deposit, I literally had $42 in my bank account left. I am sure that that is true for many a 20-something who moves to this city. So many of us don't see a future here in Cambridge because of the high cost of rent, and that's not even to mention the cost to own a home. I was shocked when I saw that there was a house 2 doors down from me on Berkshire Street, which is 15 minutes from the Red Line, that was on the market for over $900,000, and really thought, wow, I'm never going to live here long term. So many of us, so in addition to stronger protections for tenants, and I'm in full support of the short-term rentals proposal, we so badly need revenue for affordable housing to fund things like vouchers for low-income renters and for home buyer programs that allow people who are young, who are professionals like me, to see that we might have a future here. And I think that one of the most important things that we can do in Cambridge is to continue the drumbeat for more affordable housing revenue. This is a place where we can band together with cities across the state to make sure that everyone in Cambridge and elsewhere feel like we have a future here. So thank you for proposing it, and I really look forward to working with so many of you to shepherd it through the State House.
Thank you. David DeCellis, followed by Ruth Riles.
Good evening, Vice Mayor Devereaux and councilors. My name is David DeCellis. Besides being a resident living on Windsor Street since 2002, my wife and I have 3 children in the Cambridge public school system. I am commenting tonight on the varied art funding policy orders co-sponsored by Councillor Mallon and the Mayor, Public Order Policy Orders 5, 6, and 7. Beforehand, I should also point out that all 3 of my kids depend on the arts, not only to thrive, but as creative outlets. We may have something to do with that. Both my wife and I are designers by training and professionally making a living, providing for our family, paying our mortgage, and paying our taxes by practicing architecture and landscape architecture, 2 professions with a strong alliance in the arts. As a longtime advocate for the arts, I wish to express my thanks to Councillor Mallon for taking on the charge of the newly formed Mayor's Arts Task Force, and especially for these 3 policy orders, which, by the way, were beautifully written. They were actually a pleasure to read. Thank you. First, briefly addressing policy orders 5 and 6. Policy order number 5, which leverages hotel and motel tax and cannabis sales taxes to fund the arts community. For those of us who have read the articles in the Mayor's Arts Task Force and looked at what other leading cities are doing to fund the arts, is a no-brainer. I also urge you to support policy order number 6 regarding the Central Square Improvement Fund, with no less than 25% of the funds generated to be given in support of the arts. I do agree with some of the comments that were stated earlier. I do want to point out that that leaves 75% that we could use in a very discretionary way towards housing and other very worthy causes. Now, regarding policy order number 7, while good things have in fact recently occurred with the Percent for Art program, for instance, the City Department of Engineering's Catherine Kelly spearheading a productive partnership with the Cambridge Arts Council and the Public Art Commission, which resulted in the beautiful Fern Street project. And number 2, the Office of City Manager partnering in a very timely fashion with Cambridge Arts Council and the Public Art Commission on the current construction and art installations at the King Open School, the library, and the pool. These projects, when you take a long view, are the exception. More can be done and should be done in a consistent fashion. As Councillor Mallon and the Mayor point out in ordinance number 7, the 1% rule has not been equally applied. I urge you all to support this ordinance for equitable, consistent funding for the arts and consider increasing it to 2%. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have Ruth Riles here and Sue Butler? Ruth? But come on, Sue.
Good evening, City Council. I'm Sue Butler. I live at 14 Clinton Street. As you probably remember, one of my main concerns is sustainability, and I will get to that. There are a number of orders here that are really excellent. Televising the Ordinance Tree Committee is very, very important. You've got trees at Volpe to protect. You've got a failing tree canopy that needs to be repaired. Please televise it. The arts will improve quality of life in the city, And cities are the most sustainable way to live because you can walk everywhere and it's close. Support the arts every way you can. When was it? I think it was in the 80s. I served on Ken Reeves' Commission for the Arts and Commission for Central Square, and I'm still here advocating and thanking you for taking these actions. The airplanes, I don't know if that includes helicopters, but there's massive harassment by low-flying helicopters. And one of my neighbors observed a helicopter hovering over my house for over an hour one day. I think that was the time that I called the FAA hotline, but we really need oversight on helicopters as well as jets coming out of Logan. As for Mercer Circle, that's just the beginning. We have massive amounts of aging infrastructure, and there will be more breaks in water mains. I've heard similar stories about electrical systems on Broadway, where they dug up the electrical system. It was put in 100 years ago. They had uninsulated raw wires carrying voltages that were high enough to make a massive green spark, and thank God the guy was able to jump out of the pit in the ground. So you've got both electrical and water, really aged infrastructure. Please do not neglect that. The bicycle plan is a great thing. Thank you very much. And finally, the reason I'm here, which is policy order number 8, the Green New Deal. This has been extensively discussed at the Sierra Club. I am on their executive committee, their energy committee, their Greater Boston group. It is strongly supported by the Sierra Club, and they will be advocating for it at the state level. And many people there, the executive director, the chair of the executive committee, have asked me to come here tonight to speak to the need for the Green New Deal. There are some rather disintegrative forces in our world which we're trying to overcome, and we must do that by focusing on sustainability. If we can get past attachment to habits, move beyond combustion, be efficient, conservative, and renewable, we can make the world a much better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. And we can welcome Mayor McGovern back to his chair.
Oh, hello. Okay, peace be unto you. Hello, everybody. Hello again, everybody. I'm Hassan Rashid. I reside at 820 Massachusetts Avenue. My public comment today is on POR number 4, 5, 6, 7, and 10, and any other agenda item that directly or indirectly relates to homelessness. In regards to POR number 4, 5, 6, and 7, I recommend that all the mentioned fees, impact, etc., taxes, hotel, motel, municipal, etc., and 1% rule, etc., be placed in a homeless trust fund. It is safe for me to state that POR number 4, 5, 6, and 7 make reference to all of the proposed and allotted public funds be designated for the arts. I think that the handling and use of public funding in this way lies on the brink of insanity and criminality. That is the allocating of public funds for the arts over homeless priorities and needs. It's crazy and discriminatory. The state of Massachusetts reported that homelessness has increased by 12% statewide, and it has been locally determined that homelessness has increased by 6% locally. To restore the American dream locally for the homeless, a homeless trust fund should be set in place to receive the public funding from the revenues and resources mentioned in POR number 4, 5, 6, and 7. That holds true for POR number 10 also. You public policymakers offer no long-range solutions here in Cambridge, Massachusetts for dealing with ending homelessness locally. It seems that you are hoarding these streams of potential and allocated public funding in the name of arts. Every right-minded social scientist in Cambridge should be appalled at this. Again, to place art initiatives over living homeless priorities doesn't make civilized economic sense. Also, it isn't good common economic sense to turn the potential real estate transfer fee over to the Affordable Housing Trust in the name of addressing the affordable housing crisis here in Cambridge. Affordable housing here in Cambridge doesn't directly and specifically mean building new homeless housing from the ground up. From past experiences here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, it's plain to see that affordable housing to the Affordable Housing Trust doesn't mean below market rate affordable homeless housing. The Affordable Housing Trust Funds has never in its history allowed the homeless to weigh in on its decision making or allowed them their citizen participation rights. These are acts that lie on the brink of insanity and discrimination. Even now, I don't think that the Affordable Housing Trust has plans to allow the homeless to sit and participate at its table. The Affordable Housing Trust won't even advocate for the use of public-owned parcels to be used for extremely low-income homeless housing. Number of
Thank you, Mr. Rashid. Alexandra Markowitz.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and councilors. Thank you for having us. I'd like to voice my support for Policy Order 10 tonight on behalf of, well, as a resident, but also on behalf of A Better Cambridge. I'm a new board member of that organization. And we're really excited that this is on the table. Cambridge, as we all know, is in the midst of a massive housing crisis, and every day where people who are working class families, young people, people of all different communities are losing the ability to be able to live here. And we think this is an important step in being able to raise revenue for much needed affordable housing stock. And so we're in support of it, and that's sort of all I prepared for today. I guess since I have more time, I'd also like to voice support for Policy Order number 4 and echo comments we've heard earlier on putting much more than 35% of that revenue into affordable housing. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Lauren Gibbs.
I'm Lauren Gibbs from 3 Newport Road, Apartment 1. I'm speaking in support of CMA number 1, 2, and 3 because the firefighters need support, but also they need funds to continue student awareness of fire education. That program needs that $10,386, and seniors need also need an awareness of fire education program. Whatever needs to happen for travel and training for firemen is all right too, but I wanted to say that I think that you ought to create some kind of meeting or place where people who have been affected by fires can help to create what the program is that helps students become aware of fires, and seniors. I mean, seniors there's more seniors who have been in fires, probably pretty much because they've been smoking in bed and causing fires that way, but there needs to be fire safety for everyone, and not only fire safety having to do with flames, but also having to do with smoke inhalation. And so there ought to be a way for people to be able to bring these things to the attention of the fire education group.
Thank you. So we now go back to those who were skipped. Nate Fillmore.
Hi, I'm Nate Fillmore, 13 Marcel Street, number 3. I wanted to speak briefly on the policy order introducing the cycling safety ordinance. While this ordinance does not accomplish everything that needs to be done, it is an important step in making sure that over the long term, the city follows through on its commitments to making our city safe for everyone to get around, regardless of which mode they choose. I just wanted to say thank you to the mayor, the vice mayor, and all of the councilors we've been working with on this important ordinance. Also wanted to thank the city manager for his strong support in putting together this ordinance. And finally, I wanted to call out for special thanks Will Durbin from the mayor's office, as well as Suzanne Rasmussen and Nancy Gloa on the city staff for their crucial help in putting together a draft that I think everybody can support. There's many other important items on the agenda, including the Green New Deal, arts revenue, real estate transfer tax, and airplane noise issue. But I'll just keep it brief. Thank you very much.
Thank you. John Koparski. Is John here? Okay. Lajos Heder. Ellen Schachter, I don't see. Mark Boswell. Janie Katz-Christie, I don't see either. Laura Runkle. Ruth Riles. That's it. Is there anyone who did not sign up who would like to speak on an issue on tonight's agenda? Please come on up, name, address, and the issue you're speaking on, please.
Happy New Year. James Pierre, Columbia Street, 69 Columbia Street. I am here to speak on support on policies 4, 5, and 7. As a lifelong resident in Cambridge and an employee of an arts organization in the city, I can speak firsthand on how especially, ordinance number 7 benefits our community. Through ordinance number 7, I was around when the FLOW grant got awarded to an organization I was a part of, and I witnessed how it was able to not only hire local artists, but also youth from that community, educating them in the arts and also creating economic opportunity for them. Support for those ordinances, I feel like, is a win for us as a community in general, and assured that Cambridge will always be a diverse, advanced place to live in the arts. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who did not sign in who would like to speak on an issue on tonight's agenda? Peter?
Peter Valentine, 37 Brookline Street. Very short. We notice that we use our muscles to get from one thing to another, to write, so forth and so on. But we have a muscle that we never use, and that is the muscle of our feelings. And our feelings are very subtle. And if we can combine a knowingness and action with our feelings, we'll be there.
Thank you, Peter. Anyone else? Yep, come on up. Name, address, and the issue you're speaking on, please.
Bill Wendell, 97A Garden Street, Policy Order 10. Dear members of the City Council, from my perspective as an affordable housing advocate, the proposed real estate transfer tax is not new, not bold, and not enough. Those three strikes do not count it out. To the contrary, it is a rallying cry to count more than luxury real estate transactions. Count on data in the MLS, and count on the people of God and goodwill. Really, data points to opportunities, And Scripture points to social justice and redistributing wealth. Take a look at the roots of Habitat for Humanity. Some might be impressed that a 2% transfer tax on 73 MLS transactions over 2 million last year in Cambridge would have generated 4.4 million in revenue. That's approximately enough to build 9 affordable units at 500,000. What's more impressive, or maybe depressing, is that 7 homes in Cambridge sold 500,000 over their asking price last year. Yes, $500,000. Those $500,000 bids, all 10 of them, totaled $5 million. In other words, bidding wars on just 7 properties, just 7, could build 10 affordable housing units at 500 each. One need argue that the Gilded Era of Cambridge real estate has reached unthinkable heights. When bidding wars soared 50,000 over asking price 5 years ago, some called it crazy. Now that winning bids are soaring 5 to 10 times that amount over asking price, is it time to call it a moral crisis?
Please direct your comments to the chair.
Or a market opportunity? Your answer may depend on whether you think Cambridge is blessed or cursed with an embarrassment of riches. You need not be a member of the clergy or a billionaire to answer that question. We can co-create innovative responses by engaging multiple perspectives. In a handful of hotspots around the world, 15% transfer taxes are finally beginning to tame housing prices. Should Cambridge follow their lead or engage the local fintech real estate community to do something new, something innovative, and something that leverages what I would call the holy use of money? I invite you to read the comments. They're online, and I will leave copies. I have 20 copies for anyone who cares to take a look at these thoughts. Thank you for letting me share mine.
Thank you. Anyone else who did not sign in who would like to speak on an issue on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, on a motion by the Vice Mayor to close public comment, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and public comment is closed. We now move to reconsiderations. There are none. We move to the City Manager's agenda on a motion by Vice Mayor Devereaux to bring the City Manager's agenda forward for discussion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Pleasure of the council. Is anyone pulling, Vice Mayor?
Sorry. I will pull 1 and 2 together since they're sort of attached.
Okay. Anything else? Roll call on the balance.
On the consent agenda items, Councilor Calhoun.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Devereaux. Councilor Kelly. Councilor Mallon.
Yes.
Councilor Siddiqui.
Yes.
Councilor Simmons. Councilor Toomey. Councilor Zondervan.
Yes.
Mayor McGovern.
Yes.
And the consent agenda items are adopted on the affirmative vote of 9 members.
We now go back to City Manager. We will pull 1 and 2 together. City Manager agenda item number 1, transmitting communication from Louis A. D. Pasquale, City Manager, relative to the appropriation of a State Executive Office of Public Safety grant in the amount of $10,386 to the Grant Fund Fire Salary and Wages account, $8,286, Grant Fund Fire Other Ordinary Maintenance account, $1,800, and the Grant Fund Fire Travel and Training account, $300, to provide funds to continue the Student Awareness of Fire Education SAFE program. And City Manager agenda item number 2, transmitting communication from Louis A. D. Pasquale, City Manager, relative to the appropriation of a State Executive Office of Public Safety grant in the amount of $3,200 to the Grant Fund Fire Salary and Wages account, $2,500, and the Grant Fund Fire Other Ordinary Maintenance account, $700, to provide funds for the Senior SAFE program. These were pulled by Vice Mayor Devereaux. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to our manager and Fire Chief. Well, thank you. And I first want to take a moment to acknowledge our speaker, Lauren Gibbs, who came to speak on this subject that is very important to all of us, but especially important to her. And it was brave of her to come. So these are two relatively small state grants. And my main question is, do we rely solely on the state grants to fund these educational programs, or is there money that we contribute, and anything you can tell me about whether these programs have grown recently, participation, that sort of thing? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the opportunity. So the SAFE program was initiated, I think it goes back now probably close to 20 years. It's administered through the Department of Fire Services, the State Fire Marshal's Office. The grants are handed out basically all at once from DFS and the Marshal's Office to the communities around the state. The funds come, I believe, from tax on cigarettes and smoking products, cigars, pipe tobacco, etc. So we don't really apply for a specific amount. They just kind of divvy up the money as I think they do it maybe by population, things like that. So the SAFE program is designed in particular to get fire personnel into the elementary schools. We try to make a contact with, I believe it's every second and fourth grader, if I'm not mistaken, of the target audience once per year. We try to make a connection with each child in the second and fourth grade. The Senior SAFE program is targeted, pretty self-explanatory, towards the elder population with more of a focus on preventing burn injuries, trip hazards, things like that. So this is our main source of funding to target those two particular audiences. We do engage with particularly children through other avenues, whether it's various school groups or organizations that have firehouse visits, requests for the fire department to participate in certain community events. We do a fairly significant display and interaction at the annual Danahy Park Day every year, where we have a sprinkler trailer that shows the merits of residential sprinkler systems. So we do not really have a tremendous opportunity to. I think we engage with the community on a fairly regular level or frequency with respect to these engaging with the children in particular, but there's always room for improvement. I'll be the first to say that. We do try to engage with the universities. We had a pretty successful program back in the fall with MIT that garnered a tremendous amount of interest from the student community there. We always are trying to distribute the fire safety message, whether it's through social media and our various interactions with the public.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes. I want to highlight, though, this is a reimbursement to the general fund. So there is overtime money used in the budget for these programs as well. It's not just limited. This is a reimbursement to help cover the cost of the overtime. Obviously, we try to balance, but there is the flexibility if this is not the line item that the money comes out of. It then gets transferred to the overall fire budget.
I see. Thank you. Well, I'm pleased to hear about the MIT program. I think when we hear students, many of us hear older students, particularly college students, who may be either living off campus for the first time and not maybe remember the training they had in second and fourth grade. So anything that we can do to partner with the three main universities here would be really helpful. And when you say that it's partially funded by the cigarette tax, we'll soon be having a tax that we've heard about through another context tonight on cannabis, which isn't always smoked, but which is smoked. So maybe a tiny portion of that could also go to various fire safety efforts. Thank you.
Pleasure of the council. Roll call on 1 and 2.
On agenda item number 1 and 2, Counsel Carlone. Vice Mayor Devereaux.
Yes.
Counsel Kelly. Counsel Mallon.
Yes.
Counsel Siddiqui.
Yes.
Counsel Simmons. Counsel Toomey. Counsel Zondervan.
Yes.
Mayor McGovern.
Yes.
And the orders are adopted on the affirmative vote with 8 in favor, 1 recorded as absent.
We now move on to calendar items. Pleasure of the council.
We have 2 and 3 that need
Yeah.
to be.
We need to pull 2 and 3. Those are loan orders. Any
I think we'll pull number 1.
1? Okay, I'll pull 2 and 3. Anything else? All right. We will go back to number 1. Airplane noise reduction update on noise and vibrations from a concentration of low-flying airplanes originating at runway 33L at Logan Airport continue to disturb many residents. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, they do continue to disturb many residents. I myself filed at least 6 or 7 complaints to Massport on Saturday when the air traffic started very early in the morning and continued fast and furious. So I certainly sympathize with the residents who are at the end of their rope with this. And having introduced this policy order the first time around, perhaps inadvertently giving too much credit to the MIT study when I now realize it is still in draft form and there is a process through the regional CAC to go over its findings and hash out a regional solution. I would like to suggest that we pass the amended order that I submitted several weeks ago, which is on there, and which basically just asks for a report to the council so that we all better understand both the problem and some of the proposed strategies, both in the MIT study and in anything else that is going to be discussed before this process gets underway, because all of us are receiving complaints for residents, and it's difficult. It's a highly technical subject. It's difficult to know sort of what the right answer is. We all want to help. We're all well-intentioned in that, and we do realize that it is a regional problem and it needs a regional solution. So, if we could, I guess the clerk is going to have to tell us how to bring forward this version that I amended back on December 10th.
Mm-hmm.
So what we can, if there's more discussion, we'll have that. But what we would do is we would move the amendments, vote the amendments, and then vote on the order as amended. Councilor Kelly, did you? No? Pleasure of the council? Okay. So, Madam Clerk.
Through Counsel Kelly, Mr. Mayor, through you to Counsel Kelly, there was also a substituted version that you had submitted, but no action was taken. So,
no action's a good place for that one to be.
okay,
Thanks.
thank you very much. Just clarifying it.
So do you want to call on the amendments?
No, it's just the amended by substitution.
So on the order amended by substitution, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move on to unfinished business number 2, a communication transmitted from Louis A. DePasquale, City Manager, relative to an order requesting the appropriation and authorization to borrow $600,000 to provide funds for the installation of a new boiler at the Solomon Building at Cambridge Ringe and Latin School and other related improvements. The question comes on adoption on or after December 24th, 2018. Is there any discussion? Roll call.
On calendar item number 2, Counsel Carlone.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Devereaux.
Yes.
Counsel Kelly. Counsel Mallon.
Yes.
Counselor Siddiqui?
Yes.
Counselor Simmons? Counselor Toomey? Counselor Zondervan?
Yes.
Mayor McGovern?
Yes.
And the lone order is adopted on the affirmative vote with 8 in favor and 1 recorded as absent.
Unfinished business item number 3, a communication transmitted from Louis A. D. Pasquale, City Manager, relative to an appropriation and authorization to borrow $3 million to provide funds for the design and reconstruction of the Tobin School building. The question comes on adoption on or after December 24th, 2018. Is there any discussion? Roll call. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilor Carlone, I didn't see you.
The only, I totally agree with this. The only discussion, and I'm happy to talk to the manager directly, is that on any large project, we should at least get updates of where the status is, where the design is, so we're not surprised at the end with the finished product. So it's more an ongoing discussion with the manager about getting appropriate updates in any large investments.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor. I'm sure we will do that. We are scheduling a roundtable with the school committee on this very subject for February.
Thank you.
February 26th.
Thank you. We also got the official thumbs up, too.
Oh, and we're getting the thumbs up from the other room. All right. So on the appropriation.
Mr. Mayor, one quick thought to follow up from what Councilor Carlone was saying. I think that a community meeting is also going to be scheduled this month or hopefully before the roundtable on the 26th so that we have some input from the community when we have that conversation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call.
On calendar item number 3, Counselor Carlone?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Devereaux?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly? Yes. Counselor Mallon?
Yes.
Counselor Siddiqui?
Yes.
Counselor Simmons? Counselor Toomey? Yes. Counselor Zondervan?
Yes.
Mayor McGovern?
Yes.
And calendar item number 2 is adopted on the affirmative vote with 8 in favor and 1 recorded as absent.
We now move on to applications and petitions. There are none. Communications on a motion by Vice Mayor Devereaux to place communications 1 through 10 on file. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Resolutions on a motion by Vice Mayor Devereaux to bring forward the resolutions making unanimous upon adoption. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Would anyone like to pull a resolution? Okay. All in favor of making, adopting the resolutions making unanimous upon adoption, say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We move on to policy orders on a motion by Vice Mayor Devereaux to bring the policy order list before us for discussion and adoption. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Pleasure of the council. Councilor Mallon.
Can I pull 5, 6, and 7, please?
Mr. Mayor,
Vice Mayor.
may I pull number 9, please?
Mr. Mayor, number 10.
Councilor Siddiqui.
Number 1.
Councilor
Number 8.
Zondervan. 3.
8. Mr. Mayor, number 8.
8.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Pleasure of the council. No. On the balance. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to policy order number 1, creating gender X on Cambridge birth certificates. This was filed by myself, Councilor Simmons, Councilor Mallon, Councilor Siddiqui, pulled by Councilor Siddiqui. Do you want to go first? You want me to go first?
I just had an amendment.
Oh, okay.
So the first whereas, on January 1st, 2019, a new law took effect. And I want to start off in saying thank you to the mayor for lead sponsoring this. Very happy to be a part of co-sponsoring this. As I read back through it and recognized some of the prior bills, New York, Oregon, Washington, I want to just clear up the fact that we are allowing the first sentence that allows residents and parents to indicate a third gender category X on birth certificates as misleading. It's all of the bills that have come, the precedent that exists allows the latter, so allowing transgender and gender non-binary people born in the city to amend their birth certificates. So to say that we're allowing parents to indicate it, there's a New York Times article that clarified that it's not doing that. It's for people who are coming back and saying they want to amend their birth certificate instead of whereby parents, when you're born, electing.
Right. The only, if I can just, because I was just thinking about this today and talking with someone about this today, first of all, if a parent at the time of a child's birth doesn't want to choose male or female, I don't see why we wouldn't allow them to have another option anyway. But I'm also thinking, one of the things we certainly saw during the whole question 3 conversation was a lot of people who were not 18 years of age who will need their parents, because they're minors, to be able to sign off and do something like this. So that's the other benefit I see by having that in there. It's not necessarily just at the time of birth, but if you are 12 years old or 11 years old and you want to change your birth certificate, you can't do that on your own. You're going to need a parent to do that for you. So this would allow that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a part of the law that exists in other states. If you are a minor, your parent would then be allowed to amend on your behalf. Okay. I think the sentence, when I read it a few times and talked to a few people about it today, it gave the impression, it was confusing to me. If other people find it's not, then it's fine. I think I'd feel more comfortable just saying a new law took effect in New York City, allowing transgender and gender non-binary people born in the city to amend their certificates, because that's the law that occurred that's passed in New York.
Right.
Because if you look at the bill, and I can send you the bill, that's what it says. It doesn't say the former sentence. So it's just a attention to a detail that I thought we should point out. And I agree with you. I think when moving forward, if whatever comes before us from the city solicitor, we can react to it. But it was just more reacting to
what was passed in New York.
New York, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so tell me what you just...
So we would just strike, I would move that we strike allows residents and parents to indicate a third gender category X on birth certificates, so that it's then just on January 1st, 2019, a new law took effect in New York City allowing transgender and gender non-binary people born in that city to amend their certificates without having to go through burdensome medical and administrative barriers.
Okay. I had Councilor Mallon and then Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at the amendment, I'm wondering if we're missing the gender category X somewhere on this policy order, since it's taken out in that first whereas, but I guess it's down here in the ordered. Are we okay with that?
It's in the ordered, yeah.
Yep, thanks.
Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, and I appreciate the clarification, because I wasn't aware of that. And as I'm reading this, though, I don't read this to say that the parents are allowed to indicate gender X at birth. It just says they're indicating gender X in order to then amend the birth certificate. So I'm not sure striking that sentence necessarily changes anything.
Well, I think the striking, if I understand, the striking of the sentence is because the sentence doesn't actually fit with what was passed in New York. That first whereas is talking about the New York law, and the New York law doesn't allow parents to, it's not written that way. So what we decide to pass, we'll discuss, and we might support parents having that right or not.
Right, but I'm confused, because I thought it does do that. It's just that in order for them to amend the birth certificate, they have to change the gender to X. It doesn't say that this is happening at birth. It's a lead-in to allowing to amend their birth certificate.
Councilor Zondervan, I can send
Councilor
you
Siddiqui.
the bill and where my interpretation is coming from.
Yeah, I'm not disputing your
This-
interpretation. I'm just trying to understand. I recognize the sentence is a little bit ambiguous, but I don't think it actually says that they would indicate it at birth.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's the first whereas that's just referring to New York. In the end of the day, I don't think it matters one way or another, because we're going to get the city's, we're going to have to go through our process, and we'll write whatever we want to write, regardless of what New York did or didn't do. So, it could stay or go. But if it's, I trust Councilor Siddiqui's interpretation. So, but at the end of the day, we'll write our own and figure it out for ourselves. So, any other comments? Councilor Mallon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So now that we have got our administrative duties out of the way, I just want to talk about this a little bit, and I wanted to say thank you for bringing this forward. As we mentioned, New York City just passed this law, and Cambridge would be joining the states of Maine, Oregon, California. Washington, D.C., New Jersey will be joining them starting in February. So in Massachusetts, the Senate voted on a Gender X bill just last July, but it's yet to be taken up in the House or signed into law by the governor. We have no idea if and when this will actually happen. In addition, this is just state IDs, not birth certificates. So we hope that this home rule legislation will prompt other municipalities to follow suit and signal their support for a statewide version, and that pushes this issue to the forefront of the State House agenda this term. This designation would be a signal to our transgender and non-binary conforming community that their municipal leaders and city government care about them and respect their gender identity. There's so many times in our lives where we show our IDs, and this would just be one step in ensuring that transgender residents receive the dignity and respect that they deserve. So thank you for bringing this forward. I'm proud to be sponsoring this, and I hope my colleagues can join us in making this really important step for this community.
Thank you. Yeah, I was talking with someone from the Globe today who called, and there's a lot we learned from the Question 3 campaign, and we certainly learned that there is still a tremendous amount of discrimination and misunderstanding and toxicity from a large number of people, not just in this state, but in this country. But we also learned that there are a lot of people that feel differently. And certainly in Cambridge, we know that it was close to 90%, is that right, for Yes on 3? And we know that it's long overdue that we need to start thinking about these issues differently. And this is a step, to make that happen. And it is a step to, again, as you said, Councilor Mallon, hopefully, sending a message that, that we are supportive and welcoming to everybody. And it's long overdue. So, hopefully with this, it will get some traction at the State House. I know a number of our delegates at the State House, I believe all of them will be in support of this. I've certainly spoke to a couple of them, including Rep. Decker, who is supportive. So hopefully this will give it some momentum on a larger scale. But once again, we should not let the slow pace at the state hold us up. So with that, we have to vote the amendment. So on Councilor Siddiqui's amendment, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. On the order as amended, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Thank you. We now move to policy order number 5, that the city manager work with the Cambridge Arts Council and Department of Finance to allocate a percentage of the hotel motel tax revenue and adult use cannabis tax revenue to the arts in fiscal year 20 budget. This was sponsored by Councilor Mallon, co-sponsored by myself. Councilor Mallon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Through you, there's a full write-up of last month's Arts Task Force meeting that was submitted for tonight's meeting, and it's in your book, and it's also online for those at home. Just to remind everyone, this task force is made up of 23 people, including working visual artists, dancers, theater professionals, musicians, as well as city staff and interested stakeholders, and was appointed by the mayor. We are actually aiming to be more responsive than a typical task force, which would generate a report at the end of the task force with recommendations. This task force is looking to be a little bit more action-driven, and these orders represented the collective will of this task force at the last month's meeting on funding. The FY city budget allotted only just over $1 million to supporting arts and arts programming. To put this into perspective, as someone said at the Arts Task Force, we allotted $900,000 to the participatory budgeting last year, a difference of only $168,000. This order asks that the city look at dedicating funding streams for the arts through two different tax models, the hotel-motel taxes and adult-use cannabis taxes. Hotel-motel taxes are used to fund arts in places like New Bedford, Houston, Texas, San Diego, California, and more as a form of cultural tourism. According to a report called the Arts and Economic Prosperity Report, Cambridge brings in over $7 million annually in revenue from the arts, which is a robust return on our pretty modest investment. As a task force, we believe that the investment must go both ways, and funding the arts and the artists who create it with a dedicated revenue stream is critical. We're asking that the city consider dedicating 15% of the hotel-motel taxes annually to the arts to be used in a variety of ways. Grant funding to support artists, celebrations and festivals, public art like the Suffragist Memorial we proposed earlier this year, and more. This order also requests that the city explores ways to use the tax revenue that will be generated due to the adult use cannabis sales, that the arts be considered for a portion of that revenue as well. There are also other indirect ways that the city can support our artists that we discussed, and we'll be bringing those forward and as well in the months to come. But I hope that my colleagues can join me in making this request for these direct funding mechanisms to support our artists and arts in our community here in Cambridge.
Pleasure of the council. Okay, I want to thank you, Councilor Mallon, not just for this, but leading the Arts Task Force, and it's great to see that recommendations are, sometimes we wait till the end and then there's a long process, but it's nice to see that you're moving things forward and good work is coming out of there, so thank you for that. Vice Mayor, you?
Oh, well, I wanted to
I
say
couldn't tell
something,
if you
but
were
you
scratching
were,
or
no,
raising
I'm
your
not
hand.
scratching, but
That was an auction.
I wasn't sure if you were going to go straight to a vote or if you were going to invite more people to talk.
Oh, when I said before, pleasure of the council,
Yeah,
no one, so that's why I
that
went,
was
but-
when I was scratching, probably.
Oh, okay, but do you want to, go ahead.
Thank you. No, I want to thank you and Councillor Mallon. I think obviously a lot of people feel that we could do more and be more creative with our arts funding, so I think that's great. One question I had was, is the cannabis tax allowed to be spent on things that aren't directly related to the impact of cannabis use or whatever? So that was one question. And then the other question is just the hotel and motel tax, I believe now all goes to the Office of Tourism. I'm not sure exactly where it goes now. And so in reallocating it, how would that affect? I mean, I know that there is arts tourism and there's synergy, but, personally, I feel we don't do enough for tourism. That's a whole nother question.
A whole other question. Councilor Mallon, you want to answer that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the Vice Mayor, I agree that we don't do enough for our tourism either. But when I was speaking with the assessing department and looking back at old budgets, the projected hotel motel taxes versus the actual is always got a pretty big difference. And so there's kind of always a gap there. So I think there's some room there to play with. And, the city staff that is on the Arts Task Force seemed to indicate that this was a worthwhile discussion to have. New Bedford actually uses 50% of their hotel motel taxes, and I originally proposed that, but that didn't happen. So we're thinking that 15% would be roughly $3 million would be a great place for us to really start, and it does sort of represent that difference. In terms of the cannabis taxes, I believe, and this is something that the city solicitor is going to have to clarify for us, but there's a community impact fee versus the taxes. And so this is something that the solicitor is going to have to come back and let us know, but it's a great question.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Councilor Carlin, but that's my understanding is that the 3% tax, the additional 3% tax that the city can impose on cannabis sales can be used however we want to use it. Councilor Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If that isn't the case, if we simply add the words the equivalent of, if not available, the equivalent of, it's the same amount of money, and it's making it clear that that's what we're after. We don't care where it comes from.
Okay, thank you. So on the order, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move on to policy order number 6, that the city manager work with the Cambridge Arts Council, Traffic and Parking Department, Community Development Department, and Central Square Advisory Committee to establish the Central Square Improvement Fund and allocate no less than 25% of funds generated to the arts. This was filed by Councilor Mallon and co-sponsored by myself, Councilor Mallon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make one quick amendment before I spoke to this policy order. The Central Square Business Association would like to be added to the list of agencies to work with in the last ordered.
Second to last order? The second?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Do you want to, you can keep going. We'll
I didn't know if we had to vote
we'll do
on
the
that.
amendment in a minute.
Great. Central Square is a designated cultural district and has been since 2001. And as we heard earlier, while the designation is prestigious, it comes with almost no state funding, less than $5,000 annually. And the Arts Task Force is seeking ways to help fund the cultural district to ensure that it thrives. The cultural district was just redesignated for another 5 years, and the idea with the task force is to figure out where we want to be in 5 years and when we write the redesignation and backwards map from there. The Central Square Restoration Petition has a provision which waives the minimum parking and loading requirements if the developer makes a cash contribution into the fund and an amount equal to 50% of the cost of construction of the parking spaces not provided. These funds could be used in 4 different ways, and one being programming, events, and infrastructure that contribute to the cultural district established in Central Square. At the Arts Task Force meeting, we discussed with CDD and the Deputy City Manager whether or not that fund had been set up and if disbursement mechanisms had been set up by the Central Square Advisory Committee and the Central Square Business Association. So this order is just seeking to answer those questions, as well as asking for no less than 25% of those funds to be used to support the arts in the cultural district. Just as an example, the Central Square mural project that just kicked off that everyone was really excited about cost over $140,000 to put on. So to have a cultural district that's only funded by state dollars and less than $5,000 is not going to get us where we want to be in terms of having a thriving cultural district that looks like the place where we're creating art and where artists are welcome. So I hope my colleagues can support me in this order as well.
Thank you. Pleasure of the council. Okay, so we have an amendment to add the Central Square Business Association in the second order. On the amendment, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. On the order as amended, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move on to policy order number 7, that the city manager work with the Cambridge Arts Council and Community Development Department to make the appropriate updates to the city's 1% for arts ordinance. This was filed by Councilor Mallon, co-sponsored by myself, Councilor Mallon.
This is my last one, I promise. So our 1% for arts ordinance was established in 1979, is over 4 decades old, and really needs to be revisited in terms of its effectiveness. This ordinance requires that 1% of all construction costs for public projects are allocated to on-site public art. However, as construction costs have increased over time, we've heard earlier that 1% rule was not equally applied. So sometimes the city meets the 1% mandate, but sometimes for larger, more expensive projects, it doesn't. There is also questions about how narrowly this ordinance looks at funding as site-based. There have been recent examples of city projects, as one of the previous speakers, Mr. James Pierre, spoke of, like the Port Sewer Separation Project that used a grant-making committee to disperse the 1%, rather than using the funds for on-site public art. And the grants went to performances as well as visual permanent art pieces. We also need to re-examine what public art looks like, both in discipline and placement. As an example, the water department at Fresh Pond, there are a few pieces of public art that were funded through this 1% for art ordinance. However, if you look at our public art map, the pieces are inside the building. And although the building lobby is certainly accessible to the public, many residents never go inside, including myself, versus the thousands of residents that enjoy this large open space annually. If the public art was at Fresh Pond but not inside the building, imagine the difference in the amount of residents that could enjoy the art. We've been intentionally exploring equity through this task force, and when you think about equity in relation to public art, many of our residents are not going to museums or the theater or to see symphony or a play. And outside publicly accessible art may be one of the only options for them to see art. We need to be thinking in the 21st century about how this ordinance restricts the public's access to public art and how to rethink this important city ordinance. This order asks the city to provide some basic information, such as preliminary step to determine if and how our percent for art ordinance and mindset needs to be updated. I hope you guys can join me and the mayor in this effort. I also wanted to say that I needed to add one amendment, and I forgot. Councillor Simmons would like to be added to this order, and as she has done a lot of work on this previously.
Okay. Pleasure of the council. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. And I think this was something that I discussed with the Arts Council last year, and we keep going round and round about this, but I think, for instance, the Tobin School is going to be reconstructed. It could be a $200 million project. That could be $2 million to an art project. Actually, the art, you mentioned the art at the water department. The artist, one of the artists, was actually here and was supposed to speak but didn't tonight. He had told me that getting into that part of the water department is not actually that accessible. Most of the public visits the Fresh Pond, goes through the ranger station on the side entrance, but unless you have an appointment at the water department, I don't know, I haven't tried to go in during the day, but he indicated that it actually wasn't terribly accessible. And it is a beautiful installation, but it is not very well visited outside of tours and so forth. So.
Councilor Carlone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm obviously very much in favor of this. The 1% came about when Jimmy Carter was president, and he changed the federal government's perspective on art. And when the MBTA was expanded, it was a 1% program for art, for the arts. And the Cambridge Arts Council was in charge of that. And then out of that came the city similar bill. I was a consultant to the Arts Council back in the late 70s, early 80s, and I helped implement a number of pieces. And it was very successful and spread throughout the city. There are a number of pieces that are still up, not all are. I completely endorse this approach. And it could only, especially the way it's defined, can only lead to exciting things for all citizens in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. On the amendment to add Councilor Simmons, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. On the order as amended, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move on to policy order number 8 to support Green New Deal. This was filed by Councilor Zondervan, co-sponsored by myself, Vice Mayor Devereaux, and Councilor Siddiqui. Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and just wanted to briefly explain what this is all about. The Green New Deal was proposed by newly elected Representative Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, and it is an opportunity to take action on climate change at the scale that's actually required and to create jobs at the same time. So it's really important that we move forward on this. I actually joined the Sunrise Movement, which is the youth climate activist movement, at Representative Clark's office, and we presented to her staff this opportunity, and she actually signed on to the legislation. But unfortunately, the House is not currently moving forward in this particular way. I also want to bring it home a little bit to Cambridge. We're identifying a major problem with our tree canopy in Cambridge. We'll be talking about some of that on Wednesday at the Ordinance Committee. And this kind of approach would create opportunities. For example, in Cambridge, we're going to need to plant a lot of trees. Like the task force is already coming to that conclusion. And that means, again, job opportunities, particularly entry-level job opportunities that can be created so that we can both create the future we want and help people advance economically. So I think this is a great opportunity, and it's important that we continue to advocate for it. So thank you for supporting this.
Thank you. Pleasure of the council. Well, thank you, Councilor Zondervan, for doing this and for asking me to sign on. I appreciate it. It's obviously more important than ever, given not just the direction we're on, but that we have certain folks in Washington that don't even want to admit that this is a real thing. So, once again, anything that we can do to push the envelope on these important issues. On the order, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move on to policy order number 8 regarding water mains age and maintenance update. 9, sorry. Water mains age and maintenance update. This was filed by the Vice Mayor. Vice Mayor Devereaux.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, first I want to say, I mean, most of the residents who came and spoke have gone home, but I want to thank them for taking the time to come and tell us about what happened, because I really had no idea that the damage was so extreme until about a week after the flood, when I got the first email from one of my friends who lives over there. And at that point, it was actually inconceivable to me, knowing that she lived all the way across Brattle Street on the other side from Craigie Street, that those houses had been flooded. I was like, I thought the flood was way over on the Concord Avenue end of Craigie Street. And I know people on Craigie Street who didn't get flooded. So the whole thing to me was a huge surprise. And now that I've learned more about what they've experienced, and I thought the psychologist who spoke about trauma was actually absolutely right. I feel horrible, leaving aside any of the questions of legal liability. That is not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the communication and how we support residents who have gone through something like that. We've had a number of serious fires in recent years, and there's been a tremendous outpouring to the victims of fire, very appropriately. Our community comes together to help people who are in situations like that, and I really feel badly. I feel like we dropped the ball, and there are a lot of excuses, one of which is that the timing of this was right smack in the middle of the holidays for many people, and I think, I don't know, it was an un-Cambridge-like response, and so I feel badly that the city's response to victims of natural disasters, fire, flood, and so forth is being criticized in this respect. But I think that we deserve it, and we need to think about how we do respond to emergencies like this, because when you go by that house and you look behind the hedge and you see an entire basement's contents spread out on the yard, it really does look like the pictures we see on the news at night of hurricanes. So I personally am very sorry, and I look forward to hearing from the staff what we're going to do to make sure that no other residents experience this. I mean, I know that water mains do break, but our response really we can control better. Thank you.
Yeah. Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, I also, first of all, want to express my empathy for the people who have experienced this. I wasn't aware of it at all until they brought it to our attention. So that's certainly a problem. I've been experiencing a water leak across the street from my house for the last month now. And the crews have come in 2 or 3 times trying to fix it and have indicated that there's a problem with other utilities that are covering the pipe, and so they're having trouble getting to the leak. This is all very concerning that, we're having these catastrophic failures. We're having challenges fixing leaks that we are clearly aware of. We've heard a couple of times now about equipment that's failing in our city because of the chlorides in the water. And one of the residents spoke about cathodic intervention, but basically the idea is to remove these chlorides from the water so that it's less corrosive to the pipes. But overall, it seems that this corrosiveness of our water, which is much more severe than what it is in MWRA water, is causing a lot of these problems, including the erosion of our pipes, damage to our equipment. And, in the past, when I've asked about should we really be providing our own water supply, I've been told, well, when we switched to MWRA during the drought, it was millions of dollars more expensive to be on MWRA. But it seems to me that, in fact, we are incurring millions of dollars of expenses in having our own water supply that is more corrosive than it needs to be. So we also have an additional issue, which is that there's a plastics technology that could be used to fix these pipes, but there's a lot of environmental concerns about using that technology. So there's concern in the community about that. So I think we really need to take a closer look at this issue and understand what's going on, what are we doing about it, what can we do about it, and what should we do about it.
And Councilor Carlone.
Thank you. I think as terrible as the situation was, it was almost equally as bad because nobody from the city reached out to these folks, at least the people who spoke tonight. And I agree that over the holidays, maybe the ball was dropped, but to the state, I asked them after they left, to the state, to today, nobody has reached out to them. And they asked me, they said, well, we didn't even hear from anybody on the council. And I knew there was a leak. I was in Virginia. I knew there was a leak, but I didn't know it was a catastrophe. And I think we all feel that way. And I think that's an issue in itself that we need to talk about. As far as what Councilor Zondervan mentioned on his issue, there's a building going up right near where this happened. And I think when a pipe is fragile and there's borings going on, pipes break. Hopefully that becomes an example of doing a greater amount of research when a building's going up, not to stop the building, but to investigate what's below, since everything is being dug up anyway. It's a terrible situation. I think we all agree. Thank you.
So two things. I don't know, Vice Mayor, do you think, given that we want to have a broader discussion, not just about this particular incident, but what do we do in terms of if this happens again, do you think that this report should come back to a committee where we can actually have a more involved conversation versus having it come back to us here?
Well, we could start by having it come back to us and then refer it
at that point
to a committee, because I don't, but yeah, that's fine. I mean, we may want to have a more, yeah. And again, because there are legal and insurance issues, my intent was not to have a post-mortem on those aspects of it, but
Right.
really to be more forward-looking and also retrospective on how did we handle the response.
Right.
I mean, even the bit about waking up in the middle of the night and noticing flashing lights but not hearing sirens and no one knocking on their door to tell them, hey, your basement is about to flood. Those are things that we can control. We may not be able to stop every water main from breaking, but it would be good to know what we are doing proactively. So.
Yeah. And I apologize, I wasn't here for public comment. till the very end. So I didn't hear any of the folks on this subject since I was back here, but I have had some emails with some folks, and you know, I think certainly what was said by the counselors here tonight, that you know, taking a look at what our response is, you know, should be, and you know, where it could have been better in this case. So moving forward, we can be better about it. I think is certainly all true. I just do want to. I did get an email on the 30th of December from someone who lives on Mercer Circle who was having some questions. I guess trash pickup was missed, and there were some questions, and I did send that to Mr. O'Riordan, who, you know, responded right through New Year's Eve and New Year's, you know, with this resident who was representing a number of residents. They scheduled special trash pickup. They sent people out. So again, I mean, I think, you know, it shouldn't take necessarily an email. I don't know if anyone else got it. It was the one I got was addressed just to my office, but it shouldn't take an email to the mayor to then go and make sure this stuff happens. But I do, you know, I just do. They did. DPW responded very quickly and did get out there, and the resident was very appreciative that quick response. So at least, you know, I wanted to at least say that. Any other?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Toomey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I would appreciate the submission of this order. I would just like to amend it to add on the third whereas both different water main breaks to add Berkshire and Minor Street to that list too. And I'm sure there are many, many others, but that one I'm pretty familiar with that occurred in June. So if I'd just like to add that, if that's acceptable to the make of the
Berkshire and
Marney, M-A-R-N-E-Y.
Okay.
That's fine.
On the amendment, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Any further discussion?
If I can just finish.
Councilor Toomey, sorry.
Also, we've experienced residents have experienced many water breaks throughout the city, and with the cold weather, usually that's going to happen come this winter. And if I recall, in the past several years, I submitted some policy order regarding somewhat being preemptive in asking the city for a list of the oldest pipes in the city, and that probably that we should start replacing them. I'm sure there is a list of where the oldest pipes are, and they're going to be the most accessible to water main breaks. You know, so this location, and you know, I'm sure Pleasant Street, Clay Street, Emmett Street, Berkshire, and Marty, also those residents also experienced a lot of personal loss and certainly a lot of aggravation. But unfortunately, and I think, well, I'm sure I know I'm not going to discuss the legal thing, but I do have the letter from the city solicitor, you know, disavowing any responsibility of the city on the Berkshire and Marney Street. So I don't think that's the legal remedy to our residents is going to be something that's going to happen. So I don't want to get people's hopes up on that issue, but that certainly will be something for the city solicitor. So, but I just do have a copy of that letter right in front of me, where it cited the law that preempts the city from accepting any responsibility unless there was some kind of a previous action on part of the city for causing these water breaks. So, and I think that's maybe something we can look at in the future to see if there is a way to possibly have some type of financial remedy for these when these water breaks occurs in the future. But that's a discussion for another day. But I just wanted to mention that the legal remedy, I just don't think is going to happen. So, but thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Well, thank you, Councilor Toomey. I'm happy to add those streets. I was actually using the Water Department's Twitter account as my source for tracking water main breaks, and so they tweeted about these other streets, but they didn't happen to send a tweet that I found about those two, so thank you for adding those. And I agree that the order does ask for an indication of the relative age of water mains, although some members of the Water Board have told me that age is not an exact proxy for the likelihood of breaking. There are other factors, for instance, proximity to major boring or, pile driving or something could also accelerate that. So I think, age is one factor, but there are many other factors. And I think, the other aspect is informing residents about what their insurance covers, what their homeowners policies cover, and what they don't cover. And if you have finished basements, you need to really think, I think, very carefully about what your coverage is. So, thank you.
Thank you. On the order as amended, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move on to policy order number 10. The city manager is requested to instruct the city solicitor to prepare a draft home rule petition for a real estate transfer fee. This was filed by Councilor Carlone, co-sponsored by myself and Councilor Siddiqui. Before we get into discussion, I'd like to add Councilor Toomey to this order, given the work that he has done on this issue previously. And Councilor Toomey, it was my responsibility to reach out to you, and I dropped the ball, so I do apologize for that. So we'll get to that in a minute. Councilor Carlone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We, as a group, have talked about different forms of funding affordable housing. I think all of us, or nearly all of us, recognize that the funds available in the city budget do not come close to meeting the need. And this is just one additional example which has been used throughout this country and in other countries, for that matter, for different funding sources. And the emphasis is really on commercial development and high-end housing. So I don't think I have to say more than what's written in this, but some of the suggestions that were given by the public as far as changing the amount of money that is fee is based on, all that will be discussed as we enter it, assuming this gets passed, into the ordinance committee. I do want to say that the council in previous term approved the notion of a $20 million affordable housing fund, and that was not brought forth into the budget, even though I believe it was unanimous. We've talked about other funding sources as well, but the reason this is very relevant is there is a pending bill in the legislature that was viewed positively by one of the houses. And since this is not a mandatory ruling, but a option for cities and towns to undertake with a lot of flexibility, it only makes sense to show the legislature that there are cities, including at least Somerville, which has already passed something much more developed than this, to say we're interested in this, and that until we really address affordable housing in a more concrete manner, including homeless housing, as was mentioned tonight, we need something like this, and I hope it has your support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Siddiqui.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilor Carlone. Through you to my colleagues, I think some of you may be wondering, and some of the audience members and people who have written to us may have said, oh, where are the exemptions? Where are the details? And I think we, as your group said, yes, we could be really prescriptive here. I would love that. There's so many things that we could have put in here. But I do think, as we've done, and this council has done just last year with what we've accomplished with the surveillance ordinance, what we've accomplished with the cannabis ordinance, and talking through those details in ordinance committee, once we have something to react to, I think those are very good examples of what we foresee happening moving forward, and we will be working with the city solicitor on this matter. So just wanted to put that out there and to say that sometimes less is more, and that's what we try to do here. Thank you.
Vice Mayor and then Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the sponsors of this. I definitely look forward to discussing the details and hashing those out. One thing I want to note is that most of the comments we've received have focused on residential transactions, rightfully so, since most of the people who come to talk are homeowners or tenants or so forth. But this also would include commercial transactions, and there have been some very large commercial transactions that have really not had any relation to reality. I'm thinking of a couple of the large transactions in Harvard Square. Also in the Alewife Quad over the past several years, land that is developable but is basically underdeveloped or almost undeveloped has traded several times over. There's been Goldman Sachs and REITs of that caliber buying things, holding them for a year, 18 months, selling them for an enormous paper profit in the tens of millions of dollars. And that is just, it's running up the land values, it's raising all of the other costs associated with eventually developing those lands, and it's intensely speculative. So that's the real benefit and value, not necessarily in claiming a small amount from a $700,000 condo. It's those, $100 million, $40 million sales that are paper profits for many. Thank you.
Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And first of all, I'm hugely in support of this. Building on to those comments and Councilor Siddiqui's note about not being prescriptive, I'm wondering if we want to consider the $2 million figure in there, because that is a bit prescriptive. And, if we send it to the solicitor with that in there, we're essentially saying that's what we want. And is it really, or do we want to open that up a little bit and say, consider different possibilities there?
Let me answer that, because that was my suggestion. We certainly heard folks' concerns about the residential piece of this, right? And I was thinking back to previous conversations around the right of first refusal, when there were some tweaks we could have made that might have alleviated some of the anxiety that was caused in the community. So I suggested a $2 million floor, because I think that eliminates a lot of the smaller property owners that, there are a lot of residential properties that go for over $2 million, but there are a lot that don't. And, I was concerned about, was trying to find that balance. Poor Councilor Carlone got beat over the head for being too prescriptive in that when he filed that. And here we're trying to be less prescriptive, because we know that there's a lot of details that have to be worked out, but we also don't want to get, a lot of people too worked up about something that may not actually apply to them. So it was kind of, it was an imperfect science, but that was sort of my thinking of putting that in there. And I this sort of follows up a little bit on what the Vice Mayor was saying. So we looked at residential and commercial sales over the past 3 years of $2 million or more. There's some glitches in the system around the 2017 numbers, so I'm going to just eliminate those numbers for now, because we're not sure that data is actually correct. But 2015 and 16, in terms of residential, there were in 2015, if we had a 1% transfer fee, which is what Somerville has, and again, we're not settling on any number tonight. it would have yielded $3.7 million, and then in 2016, $4.2 million in residential. In residential, that's what the fee would have generated for affordable housing. On the commercial side, in 2015, a 1% fee would have generated $30 million, and in 2016, it would have generated $172 million. And I think that includes Volpe, so I think that's sort of maybe a little bit of an outlier. But you average that's $101 million a year just on the commercial side. So, I think when we look at, Somerville, we looked at Somerville's ordinance, but Somerville's different than, right? They don't have the commercial base that we have. So they really had to include residential because that is going to be their main source. We might move forward and say that, maybe we don't need to do residential, or maybe we do higher end, 5 million or more on residential, because really the money is going to come from the commercial. But I do, if you have a $2 million, if your house sells for $2 million and it's a 1% transfer fee, that's $20,000 on a $2 million sale. I don't think it's, some folks were concerned that it was going to stop the sale of property and be this hindrance. I don't think 1%, even if it was even if it was 2%, in the scheme of things, it's not that huge. But again, it's the commercial that really is going to generate, the bulk of this. So anyway, to answer your question, I mean, I'm afraid that if we take it out and we don't give some floor to it, that you're going to get a lot more people who, at the end of the day, we're probably not going to want to be included in this anyway, get really anxious and upset about it. I mean, so that was my thinking, but obviously it's the will of the council. Do you still have the floor? Do you want to?
Thanks, and thanks for explaining that. That was very helpful. And I guess it depends on where we want to go with that, because we heard a lot of public comment that basically said, well, we'd be happy to contribute. Based on the numbers that you're sharing with us, the residential contribution is almost, it's less than 10% of the total. So, you could sort of go either way, right? You could say, well, let's create opportunities for everybody to participate, or let's say, well, we're just going to exclude residential, and then people don't have to worry about it. So I can live with the 2 million, but it just feels a little bit arbitrary. And again, we heard different comments about that. So, would we not consider different options? And if we would, then maybe we want to tweak the language a little bit to indicate that.
Okay. Let me, I'm going to go to Councilor Mallon, who hasn't spoken yet, and then I'll come back to you, Councilor Carlone. Councilor Mallon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to support exploring this option. So thank you to the sponsors of this. And in doing my research this weekend, I discovered that Councilor Toomey has put this forward, it looks like 5 different times, sort of some version of this. And in 2016, it was $1 million. In 2017, it was $2.5 million. So there's sort of always been a number that's been attached to it, and I think it's good to have something to start from, especially to your point, Mr. Mayor, when people see no number, I think it can really ruffle some feathers in ways that we may not intend. I'm interested in figuring out some of the exemptions too, and hearing. I just want to recall that Deb Rue from Justice Start was here talking about whether or not, if a property was being purchased for the purpose of affordable housing, it should probably be exempt, right? So looking at sort of these exemptions, and I just want to clarify, because we keep talking about Somerville has this ordinance. They don't. It's in committee at the State House, correct? And it would impose the 1% fee only on those profiting from real estate business in Somerville, such as investors, developers, and landlords who don't live in the property that they're renting. So it's fairly narrow in Somerville. It may be the way that we end up going. It may not. I just want to clarify that it's not a current ordinance, and it also is pretty narrow. And they had a robust community process. I think everything that I've read about their community process was we're glad that we did it because not everyone agreed at the end of the day, and certainly not everyone voted for it, but I think a lot more people were on board. So I would hope that we would have the same healthy, robust conversation about this really great idea that has been in the works pretty much thanks to Councillor Toomey and some other council members since 1991. I'm kind of shocked that we're still talking about it. Considering, I can't remember who was talking, was it Lee Ferris that was saying, like, I hope that we're not here 3 years from now still talking about whether or not we should do this. We should spend the next 3 years trying to figure out the home rule petition. So thank you to the sponsors of this, and I look forward to supporting this tonight.
Thank you. I have Councilor Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The big change is that there is a bill pending in the legislature. And all the previous proposals, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Councilor Toomey, I think you had generally support for it. At least I did, and I can imagine a few others did. If without the state bill, there's nothing. So the goal of this, to bring it alive now, is to help the state bill get passed, and we will certainly have a robust discussion on different alternatives. I would imagine Councilor Kelly and myself might sit down and have suggestions. The Housing Committee might have suggestions on how we should approach this. But again, as was said by the mayor and the vice mayor, most of this money is commercial, and the other goal is to begin to tamper down on the high cost of housing. I saw a wonderful house in an advertisement that was $15 million. I remember in the 70s when the first house on Brattle Street sold for over $100,000. So there's been rampant inflation, and that's why I do think there should be a housing component, and I agree it shouldn't include all, and affordable housing developers should not be as a part of it. We can talk about all those things and get it done right. I can tell you some people in Somerville think the process was overly long and the results didn't live up to that they could have gotten there faster. We will have a good process. I have no doubt about that. Thank you again.
Thank you. Councilor Zondervan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I still personally feel it would be better to be general about everything and not have the limit, but I'm not going to push the issue if folks don't agree. Second question is whether we want to explicitly voice our support for the pending legislation. I know previous councils have done that in the past, but it would have to be restarted again, right? So would it make sense to add an order that we are in support of the state legislation and to send a copy of our policy order to our legislative delegation?
Point of information.
Councilor Toomey.
I believe at the end of the legislative session, those bills die. So everything will restart. So it'll be a new bill by the sponsor. The home rule petition, like I think from some another community, does not have to be voted again by the local legislative body. Just the rep or senator will sponsor that, but it has to go through the whole process again. So any of those previous bills that were in front of the legislature are now.
So it's going to be a new bill with a new number
so
and everything.
the whole process starts all over, except if we have a home rule petition that was adopted by the same legislative local body, then that will move forward without that vote. But it still has to have a legislator sponsor it and then go through the regular process, committee hearings and all that. So it's starting from scratch, basically.
So why don't we wait on that until we see that it's refiled and what the...
Yeah, I mean, we could either...
Once the new bill is filed, you would send a letter, yeah, with the new number.
we could do that. We could also say we support having enabling legislation just in general, and then we can always support any specific bill that comes out. But there's no guarantee that a bill will come out, and so this is an opportunity for us to indicate that.
Councilor Siddiqui.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to my colleague, we have been in touch with the delegation members, and it's a joint effort. So I think sending that, I'd say let's do it later. I think they know that we support it, and we've personally been speaking to members.
Okay. So currently the amendment we have is to add Councilor Toomey. So on that amendment, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. And no further, Councilor Toomey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a response to Councilor Mallon mentioned and yourself, my previous work on this, and I would just read from the first time I submitted this Plan for Economic Justice in Cambridge Housing was on February 28th, 1991. And to show how the things have changed in the city in terms of the price of real estate, when I first proposed it, it was a transfer fee on industrial, commercial, and upper income residential property, exempting the first $300,000 of sales price, first-time homeowners, elderly people, disability. So from $300,000 now we're talking to $2 million in 27 years. But that just shows how the real estate market has certainly changed in the city. So, and then I resubmitted it again on February 28, 1994, the similar proposal, and actually said at the time, because and this was to about a plan for a fair housing policy in Cambridge, and my last statement on that, I said, quote, the perceived iniquities of our rent control system must be addressed now. This is in 1994. Before forces outside the control of Cambridge government mandate termination of all protection of rents for low to moderate income individuals and families and seniors on fixed incomes. It would be a disaster if that were to happen, end quote. And we saw what happened just a year later when the statewide repealed rent control. So if only people that had worked together back then to make some changes to that system, we would not be in the situation we are in today. And that was in 1994. And so a year later, what I predicted unfortunately came true. But a little piece of history for everybody.
There you go.
Thank you.
Robert Winters is nodding out there because he knows it. All right, so on the order as amended, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move, that's it. What else? That's it for policy orders, yep. So we now move on to committee reports. There are two. Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just need to pull number 2 to correct a small clerical error.
On number 1, the question comes on accepting the report and placing on file. Councilor Kelly, you good with that? On accepting the report and placing the matter on file, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move on to committee report number 2. A communication was received from Donna P. Lopez, City Clerk, transmitting a report from Councilor Zondervan and Vice Mayor Jan Devereaux, co-chairs of the Health and Environment Committee, for a public hearing held on December 4th, 2018, to discuss reviewing the preliminary LIDAR-based cannabis study results from April 1st, 2018, and to discuss potential reasons for the precipitous decline in our tree canopy and any other related matter. The question comes on accepting the report and placing on file. Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was just a small error in terms of who attended, so I'm sure the clerk will take care of that. And then I did want to mention while I have the floor that we will be discussing a related matter in the Ordinance Committee on Wednesday at 5:30 on protecting our tree canopy.
Okay. So on the amendment, All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. On accepting the report as amended and placing on file. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Roundtable minutes, there are none. Communications from and reports from other city officers, there is one. Communication was received from City Clerk Donna P. Lopez, transmitting a communication from Councilor Mallon, transmitting notes of the meeting of the Mayor's Arts Task Force. The question comes on placing on file. Any comments, Councilor Mallon? No. On placing the report on file, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Any late orders or resolutions, Madam Clerk? Late resolutions.
We have two late resolutions. We have a resolution on the death of Jules J. Albert submitted by Councilor Toomey, and a resolution on the death of Bessie Robinson submitted by Councilor Simmons.
On the resolutions making unanimous upon adoption, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We have a late policy? We do not. Okay. Announcements. I have one. Councilor Siddiqui.
Just wanted to ask my colleagues to save the date for July, not July. Yeah, save the
You're really
date for
getting out in
July.
front of that one, aren't you?
Oh, God. What year? 2019. January 26th, Saturday. It's a Saturday from 12 to 2 will be our next Cambridge Digs Deep conversation. I hope that you'll join us. Thank you to everyone who attended our community forum in November 28th. We got a lot of feedback that we'll be building into this workshop with Dr. Donisa. So hope to see you Saturday, January 26th at the CRLS main cafeteria. Thanks.
Thank you. I have one this Thursday, January 10th at 6:30 at the Peabody School. We will be having a community meeting regarding the fatality of Mr. Wilson at Danahy Park. The police commissioner and others will be there to update the community on the investigation, as well as to answer any questions. So Peabody School, Thursday at 6:30. Councilor Mallon.
I was also going to bring up that we're doing the mayor's food drive starting this Saturday.
Yes.
Citizens of West Cambridge, please keep an eye out on your front porch or door for a bag that we'll be dropping off. I will be driving a bunch of high schoolers around. I will be staying in the car while they drop off bags, and then we'll come back on Martin Luther King Day and pick them up. So keep an eye out for that.
Thank you for that. Any other announcements? No? Is there a motion to adjourn? By Councilor Simmons. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. We are adjourned.